Welcome back to Cosmic Wand. Today's adventure carries us somewhere brand new. Harry enrolled at Nevermore to hide from Voldemort, and Enid's wolf marked him hers in front of the school. If you haven't yet, go ahead and smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so not a single story ever slips past you. Settle in, let's begin. Chapter 1, The New Outcast. The gates of Nevermore Academy looked like something that had decided long ago to be unfriendly and had simply never found a reason to change its mind. Black iron, taller than 3 men, worked into thorns and ravens, and a coat of arms gone green at the edges. Beyond them, a gravel drive curved up through pines toward a clutch of stone towers that put Harry in mind of a cathedral that had been told to behave and had refused. He stood at the bottom of the drive with a trunk by his foot and the cold coming up through the soles of his shoes, and he did not move toward the gates. "You're allowed to like it," Sirius said. He had his hands jammed in the pockets of a muggle overcoat that hung wrong on him, the way clothes hung on a man who had spent 12 years in a place where clothing was a rumor. He was watching Harry instead of the towers. "Nobody's grading you on enthusiasm. It's a school," Harry said. "I've seen schools." "You've seen Hogwarts." Remus came around the back of the rental car, which had brought them the last stretch of road after the international portkey had dropped them, gracelessly, in a Vermont parking lot smelling of pine sap and diesel. He carried Hedwig's covered cage in both hands like a man carrying something that might still bite him, which she might. "This isn't Hogwarts. That's the entire point." That was the entire point. Harry had heard the point made 4 times since London, in 4 different tones, and he was beginning to suspect that the number of times you explained a thing was a measure of how little you believed it yourself. A wind moved down the drive and turned the pines over, silver side up. Somewhere past the gates a bell was ringing, slow, the kind of bell that marked hours rather than alarms. Harry counted it without deciding to. 11. "Last chance to tell me what I've actually agreed to," he said. Sirius and Remus did the thing they had been doing all morning, which was glance at each other and conduct an entire silent argument in under a second before one of them lost. Remus lost. He set the cage down on the gravel and crouched to be level with it, or with Harry, it was hard to say. "You've agreed to be somewhere Albus can't reach you," with a letter and a sad expression, he said. "You've agreed to be in a country where the ministry has no writ and Tom Riddle has no informants, in a school full of people whose ordinary Tuesday is stranger than your worst day. You're going to be the most boring student here, Harry. Do you understand what a gift that is?" "Boring," Harry repeated. "A wizard," Sirius said, brightening, because Sirius brightened at the parts of a plan that other people found grim. "Among gorgons and sirens and vampires, and a girl who I'm told is technically part raven. You'll be the equivalent of a kid who's good at maths. They'll forget your name in a week." That be new. He had not meant it to land the way it did. It landed anyway, and Sirius's face went through something quick and unguarded before he smoothed it, and Harry looked away at the gates because looking away was easier than watching a grown man decide not to say the thing he wanted to say. "Here's what I want," Sirius said after a moment in a different register. He stepped close and put a hand on the back of Harry's neck, warm, the grip of someone who had nobody to practice on and had decided to practice on Harry anyway. "I want you to be 15. I want you to be bad at a sport. I want you to fail a test that doesn't matter and complain about it in a letter. I want a year where the worst thing that happens to you is somebody you have a crush on doesn't like you back. Can you do that for me? Can you be ordinary just to spite the universe?" Harry looked at him. Sirius had a scar he hadn't had at Christmas, a thin white line through one eyebrow that he wouldn't explain, and the overcoat that hung wrong, and a smile he was holding up with both hands. "I'll try," Harry said, which was a lie they both agreed to believe. Remus stood, brushed gravel from his knees, and lifted Hedwig again. "The headmistress is expecting you, Larissa Weems. She runs this place the way a lighthouse runs the sea, which is to say it doesn't, but the sea behaves better when she's watching." He smiled, the tired, real smile that Harry trusted more than any of Sirius's. "We can't come past the gates. Outsiders aren't permitted on the grounds without the headmistress's seal, and we agreed it was cleaner if no one connected to you crosses that line. You walk up alone, you give the name we agreed." "Harry Black," Harry said. "Harry Black," Sirius agreed, and the pleasure he took in it was enormous and badly hidden. A man hearing his own name on a boy he wished, in some unfair private chamber of himself, was actually his cousin. "Transfer from a small school in Scotland that doesn't exist. You're shy about it. You don't like questions about home. Nobody here likes questions about home, so you'll fit right in. And if someone asks what I am, tell them you're a wizard," Remus said. "It's true, it's rare here, and it explains the wand. The less you invent, the less you have to remember." He held the cage out and Harry took it, the weight of her settling familiar against his arm. "Write to us, real letters, not 'I'm fine.' If you write 'I'm fine,' I'll come up that drive and embarrass you in front of everyone." "He will," Sirius said. "He's done it before. There was a prefect once. This isn't the time." "There's never a time, that's the tragedy of it." Harry left them arguing, because if he stood there one more minute one of them was going to hug him and he was going to let them, and then he was never going to be able to walk up that drive at all. He picked up his trunk by the handle and started toward the gates, and the gravel announced every step, and behind him the voices dropped and went soft in the way voices did when the person they were performing for had stopped watching. Gates opened before he reached them, not dramatically. They simply unlatched the way a door unlatches for someone expected and swung in just wide enough for a person in a trunk, and Harry stepped through, and they closed behind him with a sound like a sentence ending. He did not look back. He wanted to. He had become, over the years, a connoisseur of the precise cost of looking back, and he judged this one too expensive, and so he kept his eyes on the towers and walked up into Nevermore alone. The woman waiting on the steps was very tall and very still and dressed in a white that no one with anything to hide would have dared, and she watched him come up the drive the way a chess player watches an opponent reach for a piece. "Mr. Black," she said, when he was close enough that she didn't have to raise her voice. Her accent was English under something older. "I am Principal Weems. Welcome to Nevermore." "Thank you," Harry said, and stopped a polite distance away, and waited to be told what to do, which was a skill he had, the way some people had perfect pitch. Weems looked at him for a moment longer than was comfortable. She had pale eyes that did not blink on the ordinary schedule, and Harry had the sensation of being read, not his mind. Nothing pressed at his thoughts the way Snape's intrusions had, but his posture, his shoes, his grip on the cage, the careful inch of distance he kept. "The inventory of a boy who had learned to be assessed. Your guardians told me very little," she said, "which I appreciated. People who tell me a great deal are usually lying about the half they leave out." She turned, and her white coat moved like a curtain, and Harry understood that he was meant to follow. "You will be told a great deal here, and most of it will be true, which is the school's chief peculiarity. Come. You've missed the start of term by 4 months, which means you have missed nothing of consequence in all of the friendships, and we will see what can be done about the second." He followed her up the steps and through doors that were taller than they needed to be, into a hall of stone and candlelight where the air smelled of old wood and beeswax, and underneath something green and growing, as if the building had a garden in its lungs. "Some practicalities," Weems said, walking, and Harry kept pace at her shoulder. "Nevermore educates the outcast. We do not use the word as an insult. We use it as a fact, the way one would say left-handed. Most of our students belong to one of the old kinds. We have our sirens, our gorgons, our vampires and furs, and the occasional shapeshifter, of whom I am one, so do not bother lying to me about your face. I will see the second face under it." She said this without menace, a teacher reciting a rule about library books. "You are something we see rarely. A wizard, one trained, formally schooled, which most here are not. This will make you a curiosity. Curiosity is survivable. Do you intend to give anyone reason to upgrade it to interest?" "No," Harry said. "Good answer, almost certainly a lie." She turned a corner, and the hall opened into a wide gallery hung with portraits that watched but did not move, which Harry found more unnerving than the ones at home that did. "You will room alone for the present, in a single in Ophelia Hall, which is unusual and which I have arranged because boys who arrive in the middle of the night with 2 nervous chaperones and a false surname tend to talk in their sleep, and I would rather they did so where no one is listening. You will attend classes. You will keep your wand on your person and out of sight. And you will, this afternoon, be presented to the school at the noon gathering, because if I do not present you, they will invent a presentation of their own, and theirs will be worse." "Presented," Harry said. The word had a weight to it he didn't like. Stood up, named, stared at for the length of a held breath, and then released into the general population, which is the kindest version of the thing, and therefore the one I insist upon. He stopped at the foot of a staircase that spiraled up into shadow, and she looked at him again with those pale, unblinking eyes. "You have the look of someone who expects the noon gathering to go badly." "They usually do." "Here," said Weems, "the things that go badly tend to do so on a schedule of their own and not the one you bring with you." It was as close to comfort as she seemed prepared to offer, and Harry took it because he had learned to take comfort where it was offered and not audit the quality. "Your guide will meet you at the top of these stairs. I have assigned you a student. Do not be alarmed by her." Why would I be alarmed by her? But Weems was already moving away down the gallery, white coat trailing, and she said over her shoulder, "Everyone is at first. It passes, or it doesn't, and they learn something." And then she was gone around the corner, and Harry was alone at the bottom of a staircase in a country he'd never been to, holding an owl who hated daylight, and he did the thing he always did when he had no instructions, which was go up. The girl at the top of the stairs was small and dark and dressed entirely in black, and she was standing so still that he took her, for a moment, for one of the statues, and then she spoke, and he revised his opinion downward, toward something colder than a statue. "You're the wizard," she said. She did not say it as a greeting. She said it the way a coroner names a cause of death. "I expected you to be taller. The literature is misleading." "The literature," Harry said. "There's a great deal of it. Boy wizards, chosen and orphaned, raised in cupboards, marked by fate. It's a genre. It's badly written." She tilted her head a fraction of a degree, and her dark eyes went over him with the patience of someone who had all the time in the world and intended to spend it making other people uncomfortable. "You're not in a cupboard now. You'll find the change disorienting." Harry looked at her. She was looking at him. Neither of them did anything with their face, and the standoff stretched, and somewhere in the rafters a bell ticked toward noon, and Harry decided, in the way you decide about a person in the first 30 seconds and spend the next several years being right, that he liked her. "I'm Harry," he said. "I know who you are. Larissa told me your name is Black, which is a lie because you flinched when she said it, half a syllable late, which is the flinch of a man wearing a name like a coat that isn't his." She turned and began walking, and he followed because following was the day's recurring instruction. "I'm Wednesday Addams. I'll be showing you the school. I want it understood that I volunteered for nothing. Larissa believes that proximity to a new variable will improve my disposition. She's an optimist, which is the cruelest thing one can be. What's wrong with your disposition? Nothing. It's the world's, that's the problem." She led him down a corridor where the windows were tall and the light came through in long bars that lay across the floor like something spilled. "This is Ophelia Hall. Your room is the third door. The door sticks. Don't force it. It's testing you. The bathroom on this floor floods on alternate Thursdays for reasons the administration has declined to investigate. Do not drink from the East Fountain. The East Fountain is not water. What is it? Opinions vary." She stopped at a window and looked out, and Harry came up beside her and looked too, and below them was a quadrangle of grass-gone winterpale, ringed by stone arcades, and it was full of students sitting, walking, clustered, a whole school's worth of the strange arranged across a lawn like an illustration of itself. "There's the school. You'll learn the factions. The sirens run the social weather. They're beautiful and they know it, which is the least interesting thing a person can be. The vampires keep odd hours and excellent manners. The Gorgons are gentle and tragic and very bad at eye contact. The Fur Clan keeps to itself mostly because the world has taught them to, and they're the only people here I'd trust to help me bury a body, which is the highest compliment I give." "The Fur Clan," Harry said. "Werewolves, shifters of the lunar kind." Wednesday's voice did not change, but something moved through it, the way a current moves under flat water. "They're loyal past the point of sense. They imprint, some of them in the old way, choose a person once and entirely and forever, the way a compass chooses north. It's considered romantic. I consider it a neurological event with good marketing." She turned from the window. "You'll meet my roommate. I should warn you about my roommate. Why does everyone keep warning me about people? Because the people here merit warning. My roommate is the most relentlessly optimistic creature I have ever been forced to share a wall with. She color codes her sorrows. She has a scrapbook. She is, against every principle I hold, the closest thing I have to a friend, and if you hurt her I'll remove the parts of you that I find aesthetically objectionable, which is most of them." She started walking again. "Her name is Enid." And below them in the quadrangle, somewhere in the pale grass and the winter light, a girl went still. Harry did not see it happen the first time. He only felt the edge of it, a change in the texture of the noise rising from the quad, a single voice cutting off mid-sentence, the particular silence of a crowd that has noticed something before it knows what. He came down the last stair into the arcade behind Wednesday, into the open air and the cold, and the quadrangle spread out in front of him full of faces, and he had perhaps 2 seconds to register that the faces were turning toward him before the girl arrived. She arrived the way weather arrives. One moment the lawn held its ordinary arrangement of students, and the next a streak of color was crossing it at a speed that scattered 3 vampires and a boy made visibly of smoke, and Harry had time to think rainbow absurdly, because her hair was striped pink and blue and her jacket was a riot of patches, and her nails, when she stopped in front of him close enough to count her eyelashes, were painted 5 different colors and tipped at that precise moment with claws. She stopped. She looked at him. She had wide bright eyes the color of a sky that had never once considered rain, and they were fixed on him with a focus that had nothing polite in it at all, a focus stripped down past manners to the bone, and her chest was moving fast, and she breathed in, actually breathed in, a long pull of air through her nose, the way you'd breathe in over something cooking, something you'd waited for, and her whole body changed. It changed the way a held note changes when the singer finally lets it go. Her shoulders came down, her hands uncurled. The claws slid back into ordinary painted nails, and something woke up behind her eyes, gold at the rim, ancient and absolutely certain, and looked out of a 15-year-old's face at Harry and recognized him. "Oh," Enid said very quietly, just for him. "Oh, there you are. Sorry," Harry said. The whole quad was watching now. He could feel it on his skin, the way you feel a room. Wednesday, beside him, had gone very still and very attentive, a scientist who has just seen the experiment do the thing the experiment was not supposed to be able to do. "Enid," Wednesday said with great care, "what's happening to your eyes?" Enid didn't look at her. Enid hadn't looked at anything but Harry since she'd arrived, and Harry was beginning to understand, in the slow, cold way you understand that the ground has started moving, that she might not look at anything else for some time. "Wens," she said, and her voice was bright and wrong and joyful all at once, a girl announcing the best news of her life at a volume that was not for one person but for a county. "Wens, it's him. It's actually him. I thought my mom was making it up. I thought it was a story she told so I'd stop crying about not shifting. I thought," she laughed, and it broke a little in the middle. "I never shifted, did you know that? 3 years at the worst loop in puberty in recorded history, and I never shifted, And my mom said when you find them you'll know, and everybody felt sorry for me and Enid. And then he walks in, Enid said to the whole school, to the towers, to God, and she was right. I'm sorry, Harry said, because it seemed important to say something and that was the only true thing he had. I genuinely have no idea what's happening. She looked at him then with such open delight, such uncomplicated gladness, that something in Harry's chest did a thing it had not done in a long time and did not have a name for. I know, she said, gentler now, just to him again, the county-wide volume dialing down to something that was only for the two of them, conspiratorial. I know you don't, that's okay. I'll explain everything. I'll explain it so well. She reached out slowly, telegraphing it, the way you'd reach towards something you didn't want to startle, and she took his hand. The back of his hand went warm, not the warmth of her skin, though her skin was warm. Warm from inside, under the skin, a heat that bloomed in a shape, and Harry looked down and watched its surface, a pale line curving up out of nowhere across the back of his right hand, a thin crescent like the ghost of a new moon, the color of a scar that had never been a wound. It glowed faintly gold at the edges and faded to a mark and stayed. On the back of Enid's hand, where it held his, the same crescent shone and settled, twin to it, the two of them fitting together at the seam. The quad made a sound. 100 people inhaling at once is a sound, it turns out. Somewhere a girl said a word that carried, she marked him, and somewhere else a boy said in front of everyone, scandalized and delighted, and the noise built and broke and became the open roar of a school that has just watched something it will be talking about for years. Enid lifted her chin. She did not let go of his hand. She turned finally away from Harry's face to look at the watching school, her grip tightening just slightly, and her voice when it came was not loud the way shouting is loud. It was loud the way a flag is loud. It was a thing planted in the ground. Yeah, she said to all of them, fierce and bright and entirely without apology. That's right, he's mine. Afterward, Harry would not be able to put the next several minutes in order. They came back to him out of sequence, the way pieces of an accident do. Weem's white coat cutting across the lawn at a pace just short of running, her face arranged into something that was meant to look like calm and didn't. A boy with snakes for hair watching with his mouth open and his eyes politely shut. A knot of beautiful, furious girls near the fountain, one of them with hair like dark water, who looked at the crescent on his hand and then at Enid and then back with an expression he recognized from 100 Hogwarts mornings, the expression of someone watching the social order rearrange itself without permission. And Enid's hand around his the whole time, through all of it, she did not let go. Miss Sinclair, Weems said, arriving, her voice pitched to carry only as far as the four of them, Harry, Enid, Wednesday, and herself, sealed off by sheer authority from the roaring lawn. I am going to ask you a question, and I would like a calm answer, and I would like you to remember that there are 200 students watching us pretend to be calm. I'm super calm, Enid said. She was glowing. There was no other word for it. Her whole face had the lit from within quality of stained glass with the sun behind it. I'm the calmest I've ever been in my life. Everything makes sense now. It's amazing. I should have panicked years ago. It's so much better on the other side. Weem's pale eyes went to the back of Harry's hand, to the crescent. Something moved across her face that she did not let finish. That, she said, is a true mark. I have presided over this institution for 19 years, and I have seen 4. They do not appear for crushes. They do not appear for choices made in haste. They appear when the old part of one of my students looks at another person and recognizes the whole of them. She looked at Harry, and there was something almost like an apology in it, and something like a warning. Mr. Black, on your first morning, before lunch, you are determined, I see, to be interesting. I didn't do anything, Harry said. No, Weems agreed. I don't believe you did. That's rather the trouble with being marked. It is done to you. She straightened, and the headmistress came back down over the woman like a visor. Here is what will happen. You will all come inside, away from the audience, which is the single kindest thing I can do for any of you. Miss Sinclair, you will release Mr. Black's hand when we are indoors and not before, because I can see from here that asking you to do it now would be cruel and pointless. Miss Addams stopped taking notes. I'm not taking notes, Wednesday said, who was in a black notebook with a black pen. You're taking notes. It's a true mark, Wednesday said, unbothered, snapping the book shut. I'd be a poor scholar not to. For in 19 years, you said, this is the only intellectually interesting thing to happen at this school since the fountain started speaking Latin. She looked at Harry with what was, for Wednesday, naked approval. You've improved my month considerably. I retract nothing I said about the genre, but I'll admit the execution has surprised me. Harry, who had stopped being able to find words somewhere around the part where his hand caught fire in the shape of a moon, looked down at Enid because she was still holding on, and because she was the only person in the quadrangle who was looking at him like a person and not an event. She felt him look. Of course she did. She tipped her face up, and the glow gentled into something quieter, something that watched him with a care that was almost unbearable to be on the receiving end of, and she said low under the noise just for him, "You're freaking out." "A bit," Harry admitted. "That's fair. That's so fair. This is a lot." She squeezed his hand, the crescents warming together where they touched, and she said it like a promise, like the most natural thing in the world, like a fact she was simply letting him in on. I've got you though, okay, whatever this is, whoever you're running from and you are, I can smell it on you. You smell like a person who sleeps with one eye open. That's over now. You don't have to do it alone anymore. You've got a whole wolf in your corner. You don't even know me, Harry said. It came out rougher than he meant. It came out like an accusation or a plea. He genuinely couldn't tell which, and he hated that he couldn't tell. Enid considered this. The roar of the quad went on around them. Weems began the slow miracle of herding 200 outcasts back toward their interrupted morning. Wednesday watched the two of them with the flat patience of a cat at a mouse hole, and a girl with dark-water hair burned holes in the side of Harry's head from 40 feet away. And Enid Sinclair, 15 years old, marked and marking, looked up at the most hunted boy in Britain as though he were the easiest thing in the world to understand. No, she agreed. Not yet, but I'm going to. I'm going to know you better than anybody's ever bothered to. She said it like a threat and a gift in the same breath, and she meant every word. And the terrible thing, the thing Harry would lie awake turning over that night in a single room in Ophelia Hall with the moon coming through the window and the crescent on his hand glowing faintly in the dark, the terrible thing was that he believed her. They did go inside in the end. Weems put them in a small wood-paneled room off the main hall, the kind of room schools keep for conversations they don't want overheard, and she shut the door on the noise, and the noise became a muffled tide beyond the wood. Enid let go of his hand the instant the latch clicked, exactly as she'd been told, and then immediately sat as close to him as the bench allowed, their shoulders not quite touching, near enough that he could feel the warmth coming off her, a furnace of a girl who ran several degrees too hot. All right, Weems said, and she sat across from them, and she folded her hands, and for a moment the headmistress was just a tired woman in white in a small room with 3 children, one of whom had a false name and a false story and a true mark, which was the worst possible combination. Mr. Black, I am going to tell you what just happened to you because no one else will tell you straight, and you've the look of someone who'd rather have the truth even when it's inconvenient. I would, Harry said. I thought so, she nodded at Enid without looking away from him. Miss Sinclair is a werewolf of an old bloodline. The Sinclairs are West Coast pack, respectable, prone to dramatics. Her kind, the very rare ones, carry an instinct older than the species, the true mate bond. It is not a choice, it is not a fancy. It is the wolf, the deep animal underneath the girl, recognizing one specific person out of all the billions and deciding, irrevocably, that they belong together. We call it imprinting. It cannot be faked, it cannot be undone, and it has, evidently, just happened to you. On the first day, Harry said, on a complete stranger. The wolf doesn't see strangers, Enid said quietly. She was looking at her own hands, at the crescent on hers. It sees the one it's been waiting for. I've been waiting my whole life, and I didn't even know it. Every full moon I'd try to shift and nothing would happen, and everyone said late bloomer, and my mom said maybe you just haven't met them yet. The mate, the wolf won't come all the way out until it's got something worth protecting. She looked up at him and the gold was still there at the edge of her eyes, banked but present. I've got something worth protecting now. I'm not, Harry started and stopped because what was he going to say? I'm not worth it, I'm not safe, I'm not staying. He'd been in the country for 3 hours. You don't know what comes with me, he said instead. There are people who want me dead, not metaphorically. There's a man who's tried to kill me since I was a year old, and he's back, and he's good at it, and being near me is the single most dangerous thing a person can do. He heard his own voice flatten out into the recitation he'd given before to people who then died, or nearly, and he made himself stop. You should let this go, whatever it is. I'll talk to the headmistress. There must be a way to. There isn't, Weems said gently, and Enid said at the same time and not gently at all, absolutely not, and the two statements crossed in the air, and Enid won because Enid was leaning forward now with the gold flaring back up in her eyes and her voice gone fierce. You think I care that you're dangerous to be around? You think that's the part that scares me off? She laughed, short and disbelieving. Harry. Harry Black, or whatever your name actually is. I have spent 15 years being told that the most special thing about my whole kind, the rarest, most beautiful thing a Sinclair can be, would probably never happen to me, that I was broken, that I was a wolf that couldn't even wolf. And then you walked across that lawn and the broken thing fixed itself in about 4 seconds, and I have never been so sure of anything in my entire life. She reached over slow, telegraphing it again, and laid 2 fingers against the crescent on the back of his hand, and it warmed under her touch, and so did the one on hers, and Harry watched it happen and could not make himself pull away. Somebody wants to kill you, she said, soft now, all the fierceness folded down into something steadier and worse, because steadiness was harder to argue with. Good, let them come find out what's standing in front of you. I'm not going anywhere. Yours, you absolute disaster, and you're mine, and the sooner you stop trying to talk me out of the best day of my life, the sooner I can show you where the good vending machine is. There was a silence. Wednesday broke it. The good vending machine is on the 2nd floor of the science building, she said to no one, examining her nails. It dispenses an off-brand cola that I have reason to believe is mildly hallucinogenic. I drink it for the visions. She looked up. She's not going to stop, Mr. Black. I've lived with her for 4 months. She once spent a weekend reuniting a lost glove with its owner across 3 states. You are considerably more interesting to her than a glove. You may as well let her show you the vending machine. It's the path of least resistance, and you look like a man who spent his life taking the path of most." Harry looked at the two crescents fitted together at the seam, glowing softly in a wood-paneled room a continent away from everyone who'd ever decided he was a tool, a prophecy, a weapon, a symbol, a thing that happened to other people. He looked at Enid Sinclair, who looked back and saw instead simply a person who had finally arrived. Nobody had ever chosen him first. Things had been decided about him by a scar, by a hat, by a dead man's prophecy, by a living man's long game, but no one had ever, with their whole self in front of everyone in broad daylight, picked him, out loud, on purpose, with nothing in it for them but him. It was the most frightening thing that had ever happened to him, and he had stood in a graveyard while a man came back from the dead. "Okay," Harry heard himself say. Enid lit up. The whole room got warmer. "Not okay to all of it," he said quickly, because she had already opened her mouth, already drawn the breath for the kind of joy that would be audible in the next county. "Okay to the vending machine. That's the only thing I'm agreeing to. The vending machine." "The vending machine," Enid agreed, solemn as a vow, eyes dancing, and she did not point out, because she was kinder than she let on, that he was still letting her hold his hand. Weems gave them until the next bell and then sent Wednesday and Enid to their afternoon classes, Enid with a backward look down the corridor that lasted until the corner took her out of sight, and she walked Harry up to Ophelia Hall herself, the long way, through galleries gone quiet with everyone in lessons, and she did not speak until they reached his door. "I will write to your guardians tonight," she said. "They should hear it from me before they hear it from the international gossip, which moves faster than owls and with less regard for accuracy. They sent you here to be invisible." A faint dry note entered her voice, the closest she came Harry would learn to humor. "We will not be managing invisible. We may manage safe, which is the more valuable of the two, though it photographs worse." "Is Enid going to be in danger now?" Harry asked. The question had been building under everything else, the way the important questions did, and it came out at last in the quiet corridor where no one could see him ask it. "Because of me, if they find me, will they go for her?" Weems looked at him for a long moment with her pale, unblinking eyes, and Harry understood that she was deciding whether to lie to him and that she had decided not to, which he counted to her credit forever after. "Yes," she said, "a true mate is a leverage point. Anyone who learns what she is to you will see at the moment you've just seen it. That is the cost of the thing, Mr. Black, and you did not choose to pay it any more than she did, and there is no court in any world you can appeal it to." She opened his door, which stuck, and she did not force it, and it gave under her hand, and she stood aside. "But understand also what you've gained, because it is not nothing, and the hunted part of you will want to dwell only on the cost. You have, as of this morning, the single most loyal creature on this continent standing between you and the dark. She will not waver. She does not have it in her to waver. Whatever is coming for you, and something is coming for you, I can see that as plainly as Miss Sinclair smelled it, will have to come through her and through me and through this school before it reaches you. You arrived here a hunted boy traveling under a false name. You are still that. But you are no longer alone, and in my experience that is the difference between the ones who survive and the ones who don't." She left him at his door. Harry went into the small single room with its narrow bed and its tall window and its view. He found when he crossed to it, of the very quadrangle where the morning had happened, empty now in the early dark, the winter grass silver under a moon 2 days off full. He set Hedwig's cage on the desk and opened it, and she came out and regarded him with yellow disapproval, and then, relenting, hopped to his shoulder and tugged once, not gently, at his hair. "I know," he told her. "I know, I'm aware." On the desk there was paper and ink and a window full of moon, and somewhere in the building below him, a bright loud girl was sitting in a classroom, not hearing a word of the lesson, drawing crescents in the margin of her notebook, color-coding a joy she had waited her whole life to feel. Harry could not have known that, sitting alone in his room. But he found, looking at the moon, that he believed it anyway, just as he had believed her on the lawn, and he turned the back of his right hand up to the light and looked at the pale curve of the mark she'd left there in front of the whole school, the mark that said, in a language older than wizards, that someone had looked at the whole of him and chosen to stay. He should write to Sirius. He should write to Remus. He should explain somehow in words that wouldn't bring them up the drive at a dead run, that the plan to make him boring had lasted approximately 180 minutes. He pulled the paper toward him. He picked up the pen. Outside, the moon hung patient and almost full over the towers of Nevermore, and on the back of his hand, faint and warm and entirely without his permission, the crescent glowed. "Dear Sirius," he wrote. Then he stopped and looked at the moon and almost smiled and didn't quite. "I think I'm going to need you to define boring," he wrote, "because I've met someone." Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Mine. Loudly Harry woke before the bell to the sound of someone arranging things outside his door. It was not a stealthy sound. Stealth, he would learn, was a tool Enid Sinclair owned and had decided on principle never to use. It was the sound of items being set down with care and then nudged into alignment, a percussive fussing, and under it a voice humming something with too many notes in it. He lay still and listened, cataloging it as he cataloged everything, deciding whether it was a threat, and arrived at the conclusion that whatever was happening in the corridor was the opposite of a threat in a way he didn't have a category for yet. He opened the door. She was sitting cross-legged on the flagstones with her back against the wall opposite, and she had brought a great deal with her. A thermos, 2 mugs, one of which had a cartoon ghost on it and the other a wolf wearing sunglasses, a paper bag gone translucent at the bottom with grease, a folded blanket in a plaid so loud it qualified as a weather event, and a zippered case that, when she saw him, she patted like a co-conspirator. "Okay, don't freak out," Enid said, which was, Harry was beginning to understand, the phrase she used immediately before doing something a reasonable person would freak out about. "I didn't sleep in the hallway. I want to be super clear about that because Wednesday said it would read as unhinged and she's the expert on what reads as unhinged, so I went to bed. I just woke up early, extremely early. And I made cocoa because the dining hall cocoa is a war crime and I thought, he probably doesn't know about the war crime yet. Somebody should warn him before he commits to it." She held up the thermos. "This is the warning. The warning is also cocoa." Harry looked at the spread. He looked at her. She had changed her hair overnight, the blue stripe had become purple, and there was a fresh streak of yellow at her temple that matched, he noticed, nothing else she was wearing, which somehow made it work. "Made me breakfast," he said. "I made you a defensive perimeter of breakfast." She unfolded herself and stood in one motion, balancing the mugs, and the cartoon ghost mug ended up in his hands before he'd agreed to hold anything. "Sit, or don't sit, you can stand, I'm flexible, I just want you caffeinated and informed before you go out there because," she stopped, reconsidered. Her brightness flickered, the first flicker he'd seen in her there and gone. "Because it's going to be weird today. For you, and I did that, so the least I can do is hand you a hot beverage while it happens." He sat. He hadn't decided to, the flagstones were simply suddenly under him, and the cocoa was in his hands, and it was, when he tried it, very good, much better than anything had a right to be at that hour. "What's going to be weird?" he said, though he could guess. Enid sat back down across from him, close, knees almost touching his, and wrapped both hands around the wolf mug. "So at a normal school, if a werewolf marks somebody, it's a whole thing, but it's a private thing, you know, packed business. You do it at a moonlight with your families there and a cake, there's usually a cake." She said this with the wistful authority of someone who had planned the cake at age 9. "I did it on the quad, in front of everybody, before lunch, on a guy I'd met 4 seconds earlier." She looked into her mug. "Some people are going to think that's the most romantic thing they've ever seen. Some people are going to think I lost my mind, or that I'm doing it for attention, or that you," the flicker again, "that you got, like, trapped by me, that you didn't get a vote." The corridor was quiet around them. Somewhere a pipe knocked. The pale early light came through the tall window at the end of the hall and lay across the floor between them, and the 2 crescents, his and hers, sat in it where their hands held the mugs, faintly warm, faintly gold at the edges. "Did I," Harry asked, "get a vote?" She looked up at him fast. "Do you want one? I don't know how it works. It doesn't work like anything, that's the problem. Everybody thinks they know and nobody does." She set her mug down on the flagstone and leaned forward, earnest in a way that ran past self-consciousness without slowing down. "The wolf chose. That part's done. I can't undo it. I wouldn't if I could. I want to be honest with you about that because you deserve honest. But the wolf choosing you doesn't put a leash on you." "It put a leash on me." She tapped the crescent on the back of her own hand. "This means I'm yours. It doesn't mean you're mine, not unless you want to be, not unless you decided on purpose with your actual brain some random Tuesday when nobody's watching and there's no cake. Until then I'm just," she spread her colorful hands, "I'm just a girl who brought you cocoa. You can drink the cocoa and still tell me to back off. The cocoa's not a contract." Harry held the ghost mug and looked at this person who had detonated his anonymity in under a day and then come to sit on a cold floor at dawn to explain carefully that he was allowed to send her away. "It's good cocoa," he said. Enid's whole face did something complicated and luminous. "Right, it's the cinnamon. Everybody forgets the cinnamon. I'm not telling you to back off, okay?" She said it lightly, but she folded her hands back around her wolf mug very quickly, the way you'd close your fingers around something you've been afraid of dropping. "Okay, cool, great, that's," she drank some cocoa. "I'm going to walk you to your first class as a public service. Statistically, the gauntlet is worse if you run it alone, and I have a very high tolerance for gauntlets." "What's first class?" "Botanical sciences with Marilyn Thornhill in the greenhouse, and you should know going in that one of the ferns is a liar." She was already gathering the mugs, the thermos, the blanket, the translucent bag, restoring order to her defensive perimeter of breakfast. "Come on, disaster, let's go ruin everyone's morning." The gauntlet was worse than she'd promised and better than he'd feared, which averaged out to survivable. Word, it transpired, had not so much spread overnight as metastasized. By the time Harry crossed the main hall at Enid's shoulder, the looking had become an industry. Vampires turned with the slow, theatrical patience of people who had all of eternity and intended to spend a portion of it staring. A cluster of younger students near the stairs went silent and then, the instant he passed, erupted into the particular whispering that is louder than speech. A boy made of drifting smoke condensed briefly into a face solely to get a better look and then thought better of it and dispersed. Enid walked him through all of it like a tugboat through a harbor, narrating. Okay, the staring ones by the door are nightshades. That's the elite social club, very exclusive. They do a poetry thing, don't worry about them. The ones pretending not to look are worse, those are the gossipers. They'll have a version of Last Night by Noon where I bit you, which I did not, that's not even how it works. The teeth thing is a vampire slander we've never lived down. She steered him left with a hand that didn't quite touch his back, hovering an inch off, present without pressing. And those two by the trophy case are Davina and Kent, and they're harmless. They just like to be near drama like moths, ignore the moths. A first year with feathered antennae and a notebook materialized at Harry's elbow with the trembling courage of someone approaching either a celebrity or a tiger, and unsure which. Is it true, she whispered, that you flew here on a broom and the mark glows in the dark and you can turn people into frogs? Before Harry could decide which lie to be flattered by, Enid folded down to the girl's height with the gravity of a visiting head of state. Two of those are false, and I'm not telling you which, because a little mystery is good for the complexion. Off you go, tell your friends he's nice and that crowding him is for amateurs. The first year fled, luminous with having survived the encounter. See, that's the whole game, Enid said, straightening, steering him on. They're not cruel, they're starving for a story. You hand them one true thing freely and it starves out the 10 false ones they'd have made up. I call it feeding the quiet ones. You just told me to ignore the moths. Ignore the loud moths, feed the quiet ones. It's a system, it has nuance, you'll learn it. You know everyone, Harry said. I know everyone's whole deal, it's my thing. Wednesday solves murders, I know who's dating who and who's secretly sad about it. She said it without rancor, a girl who had long ago made peace with the size of her gift and decided to enjoy it. Speaking of, brace yourself, 12 o'clock, that's the situation I told you about. The situation was standing by the greenhouse doors, and she was, Harry recognized at once, the girl with hair like dark water who had spent the previous morning attempting to set fire to the side of his head with her eyes. Close she was even more polished, the kind of beautiful that looked engineered, every line of her arranged for maximum effect, and she watched the two of them approach with the cool assessing patience of a customs officer who has decided your paperwork is forged and is merely deciding how much to enjoy proving it. Enid, the girl said, her voice did something. Harry felt it pull at the edges of his attention, current under the words sweet and insistent, the auditory equivalent of a hand on your sleeve. He'd grown up with a teacher who tried to walk into his mind through his eyes. He knew the shape of an intrusion, and he set his attention down hard, like a man planting a flag, and the pull slid off him and found nothing to hold. The girl noticed, her gaze sharpened a degree. Bianca, Enid said, and there was a warmth in it that was real and a wariness under the warmth that was also real, the complicated greeting of people who had been something to each other before they'd been this. This is Harry. Harry, this is Bianca Barclay. She runs the Nightshades, and she's the best swimmer the school's had in a decade, and she's about to say something that sounds like concern but is mostly research. I'm hurt, said Bianca, not hurt at all. Her eyes had not left Harry. I am concerned, we're all concerned, a true mark Enid, on a transfer, on a wizard nobody's heard of, who shows up in the dead of night with no records and a name that doesn't ping in any of the registries. She tilted her head and the dark water of her hair moved with it. It's a little convenient, a girl who spent 3 years famous for the wolf that wouldn't come, and then a mysterious stranger arrives and suddenly, look, it works, the magic's real, she's not broken after all. You have to admit it has the shape of a story someone would tell. Beside him, Harry felt rather than saw Enid go still. It was a different stillness than yesterday's. Yesterday's had been the wolf waking. This was the wolf deciding not to. You think I made him up, Enid said. I think you wanted it so badly that I'd want to be sure it's real before I let my friend pin her whole identity to a boy who might be a ministry plant or a con or just a kid who's going to break your heart and leave you exactly as alone as before, but now with everyone having watched. Bianca's voice softened, and the softening was the most dangerous thing about her because it was sincere. I'm not the enemy here, Enid. I'm the one who held your hair the last 3 times you cried about not shifting. I'm allowed to ask whether this is real. The greenhouse bell rang, muffled through the glass. Harry watched Enid not answer for a moment, and he understood that she could have. She could have produced the crescent, the proof, the headmistress's own word that the mark could not be faked. She had the winning card, and she was choosing not to play it, because playing it would have meant treating the question as fair, and treating the question as fair would have meant agreeing that he was something that required proving. So Harry answered instead. It's real, he said, but you're right that you can't know that, and you're right to check. If I were her friend, I'd check too. He met Bianca's eyes and held them and did not let the current in her voice find any purchase. Watch as long as you want. I'm not going anywhere, and I don't break easily, and if I turn out to be a ministry plant, you'll have plenty of time to say you told her so. In the meantime, you held her hair 3 times. That makes you someone I'd like on my side, not someone I need to win an argument with. Bianca looked at him. Something moved behind her composed face, a recalculation, the private adjustment of a person who has come prepared for one kind of conversation and been handed another. Huh, she said. It's a high score, Enid murmured sotto voce to Harry. She does not huh for everyone. I reserve judgment, Bianca announced, gathering her composure back around herself like a robe. On all of it, the mark, the wizard, the whole thing, but she looked at Harry one more time and the look had recalibrated. He had become, in the space of a sentence, a more interesting problem. You didn't flinch when I asked. People who flinch are hiding the answer. People who don't are usually hiding the question. She turned, dark water swinging. Welcome to Nevermore, Harry, no records. Try not to make a liar out of me. I have a reputation. She walked off toward the nightshade table at the far end of the greenhouse, and Enid let out a breath she'd been holding since the trophy case. That, she said, went so much better than the version in my head where she made you cry and then I had to fight a siren which I would lose. I want to be clear. Sirens are terrifying. You were going to fight her for me. I was going to lose a fight for you, Enid corrected, leading him into the warm green damp of the greenhouse where the air smelled of soil and chlorophyll and something faintly carnivorous. There's a difference. It's the thought that counts. Now sit by me, and whatever you do, do not make eye contact with the third fern from the left. It's the liar. It'll tell you you're its only friend. Botanical sciences took place in a greenhouse the size of a cathedral nave, where the glass had gone soft with age and the plants had gone hard with ambition. Marilyn Thornhill ran it in a cardigan the color of weak tea and a manner of relentless, brittle pleasantness that made Harry trust her about as far as he could throw the greenhouse. A new face, she said when they filed in, and the whole class turned, because of course it did. And the new face we've all heard about. Come in, come in. There's a seat by Miss Sinclair, though I gather that was never in question. A laugh went around the benches, not unkind. Harry took the seat. He kept his eyes, per instruction, off the third fern on the left, which was watching him with an attentiveness no plant had any business possessing, its fronds turned toward him like a row of green ears. Today, Thornhill said, we propagate the moonwort, which only roots under direct lunar exposure, which is inconvenient, which is rather the point of everything here. Pair off. New student, you may demonstrate the cutting, since I understand wizards do their botany with a stick. She said stick the way some people said weapon. Show us. Every face in the greenhouse turned to him a second time. Harry had given a great deal of thought on the flight in the portkey in the dark drive up, to the precise question of how much wizard to be in a room full of people who weren't, and the answer he'd settled on was less. He drew his wand low and unhurried and did the cutting charm the dull way, the careful way, a clean severance and nothing more, no flourish, no spark. The moonwort stem parted and sealed. It was the least impressive magic he could perform. The greenhouse went quiet anyway. A wand, it turned out, was a rarer animal here than any vampire, and the watching had a different texture now, less gossip and more genuine curiosity, the way you'd look at a tool you'd heard of but never seen used. Do it again, said a voice from the back, cool and amused. One of the nightshades, a tall boy with a sketch of charcoal on his fingers and the easy contempt of the genuinely talented. But like do something, you're not at the dentist. Xavier, Enid said in warning. I'm asking the wizard to be interesting, Enid. I'm not insulting the wizard. Xavier propped his chin on his charcoal dark hand. Everybody's been talking about him for a day. I'd just like to know if there's anything to talk about or if my roommate's right and you marked a tourist. The greenhouse waited. Thornhill watched with her brittle smile, declining to intervene, which told Harry most of what he needed to know about Thornhill. He could have done something. The retort sat ready, a flick of the wrist that would have rearranged Xavier's smugness into something humbler, and the old part of him, the part raised to expect ambush, wanted to. He set it down instead. He'd learned the long way that the people worth keeping were rarely the ones you beat in front of an audience. Nope, Harry said. Tourist, just here for the moonwort. He pocketed the wand. It's very nice moonwort. A beat. Then Xavier laughed, surprised out of his contempt, and the greenhouse laughed with him, and the watching loosened all at once into something Harry could survive, and Enid, beside him, exhaled through her nose and bumped his knee with hers under the bench. Good answer, she breathed. I'm collecting them. That's 3 today. You're going to run out. Nobody has this many good answers in them. The third fern chose that moment to extend a frond across the bench toward Harry and whisper, in a voice like wind through dead leaves, you're the only one who's ever understood me, and Harry, who had been warned, looked at it for a long moment and said, sorry. I'm taken, and the whole row of students around him lost composure entirely, and even Thornhill's brittle smile cracked into something briefly, unwillingly human, and that was the moment, more than the wand, that Harry stopped being a rumor and started being a person the greenhouse had decided it liked. The day went like that. Enid delivered him to each class the way a diplomat delivers a difficult treaty, with briefings and contingencies, and she collected him after, and in between she conducted a running campaign to install him into the architecture of her life so thoroughly that removing him would require demolition. At lunch she had saved him a seat, and the saving of the seat had clearly involved a quiet territorial war, because 2 of her friends were eyeing the empty chair with the wariness of people who'd been told with great cheer that someone would die if they sat in it. This is Yoko, Enid said, depositing Harry into the contested chair. Vampire drinks a green smoothie that I have personally never seen her refill, plays bass, has my whole heart. Yoko, Harry. The wizard, said Yoko, behind dark glasses she wore indoors, with the unbothered cool of someone who had been a teenager for considerably longer than 4 years. She slid a clementine across the table to him without being asked. You've caused an unbelievable amount of paperwork. Weems has been in meetings since 6. The quorum's involved. The quorum, Harry caught the clementine. School governing body, old families, old money, old grudges. Yoko's mouth quirked. A true mark on an outsider is a constitutional event around here. There are people who think it should be regulated. There are people who think it should be celebrated. There are people, she nodded down the table where Enid had become absorbed in defending Harry's honor to skeptical Gorgon, who think it should be color coordinated. We contain multitudes. The skeptical Gorgon was Ajax. Harry worked this out over the course of the meal, from the careful way Enid spoke to him and the careful way he didn't quite look at her, and from Yoko's quiet aside. She liked him for 2 years. He's nice, he's just got the emotional bandwidth of a houseplant, which, given the snakes, is ironic. Ajax had hair full of little green serpents that turned and tasted the air when he got nervous, and he got nervous around Enid, and he kept starting sentences about the mark and not finishing them, and the whole performance was so transparently the grief of a boy realizing too late what he'd been too slow to want that Harry found he couldn't even resent him. So it's like permanent, Ajax managed, finally his snakes doing an agitated little dance. The mark, you two are just that's it. Forever at 15, the wolf doesn't do trial periods, Enid said. She said it kindly. That was the thing about her that Harry kept tripping over. She had every right to be cruel to Ajax, who had strung her along for 2 years and noticed her value only the instant someone else claimed it, and she simply declined to use the right. It's okay, Ajax, you don't have to get it. Nobody gets it till it happens to them. I just think you could have, waited, looked around. There were the snakes flattened. There were options. There weren't, though, Enid said, and now there was steel in it, polite steel, the kind that left no mark but ended the conversation. That's what you don't get. It was never a menu. I didn't pick the best thing off a list. I found the one. There's a difference, and you'll know it when it happens to you, and I hope it does. I really do, because it's the best thing in the entire world. She turned back to Harry, dismissing the subject as completely as if it had been a weather report, and held up a fork with something orange on it. Try this. It's the one thing the dining hall doesn't ruin. Across the table, Yoko caught Harry's eye over her dark glasses and tipped her smoothie a fraction of an inch in a private toast, and Harry understood that he had just watched Enid choose him out loud a second time in a quieter key, in front of the Gorgon who'd had 2 years and wasted them. He ate the orange thing. It was good. He told her so, and she beamed as if he'd recited poetry. There was a gap before the afternoon double, and Harry spent it in his room, because a person could only be looked at for so many consecutive hours before he needed a wall at his back and a closed door. Hedwig was waiting on the windowsill with her feathers full of opinions and a letter tied to her leg, and she submitted to having it removed with the air of a creature performing a favor at great personal cost, then bit his thumb to settle the account. The seal was Sirius's, a blob of black wax pressed with a dog's paw because Sirius had never in his life owned a proper signet and was proud of it. Harry, it began, in handwriting that sprinted across the page at the speed of its author, you've met someone. I have read your 1-1 sentence approximately 40 times. Remus has taken it away from me twice. I have informed him that as your godfather it is my sacred duty to overreact, and he has informed me that as your godfather it is my sacred duty to read past the first sentence, which I will now attempt to do. Larissa wrote me the whole of it before your owl arrived, so I know about the mark and the wolf and the quad and the part where my plan to make you invisible lasted, by my count, less time than it takes to soft boil an egg. I should be cross. I have decided not to be cross. Do you know why? Because Larissa Weems, who frightens me, who has frightened grown wizards into early retirement, wrote 4 pages about a girl named Enid Sinclair, and on the 4th page she stopped writing like a headmistress and wrote one line like a person, and the line was, she will stand between him and anything. I have seldom seen the like. He could do far worse than to be loved that loudly. So, a werewolf chose you in front of God and the whole school on a Tuesday, Harry, my boy. There is a version of me, the one who spent too long in a place where nobody was ever coming, who wants to put his fist through a wall that something this big happened to you and I wasn't there in the room. And there is a better version, the one I'm trying to be, who's simply stupidly glad. Somebody looked at you and saw the whole of it and planted a flag. That's all I ever wanted for you and never knew how to ask for. Be glad with me. Write me her favorite color so I can send the right scarf. Underneath, in Remus's smaller, steadier hand, a postscript that had clearly been negotiated, Harry. Ignore 3/4 of the above. He's been insufferable since the owl came and I've hidden the fire whiskey. The important parts first. Congratulations. A true mate bond is rare and old and good, and the girl, by every account, is golden. Let yourself have it. You are allowed good things, whatever the cupboard taught you. Second, and I want you to read this twice, Albus has been fishing, quietly. He's asked the Tonks family and an old contact at the American department, and a goblin I trusted to keep his mouth shut, all the same shape of question. Where would a person hide a boy who didn't want to be found? He hasn't connected Nevermore yet. He may not, but he is not a man who stops looking for a tool he believes is his, and the mark has made you, I'm sorry to say, slightly louder than the plan allowed. Stay close to Larissa. Trust her over anyone, including us, including any letter that arrives sounding like us. If anything reaches you that smells of London, you tell her first and ask questions second. We love you. Eat something that isn't toast. Our Harry read it twice, the way he'd been told. Then he read the part about the flag a third time and sat with it, the window cold against his shoulder, Hedwig grooming herself with magnificent indifference beside him. He pulled paper toward him and wrote 3 lines. Her favorite color is all of them, but if you have to pick, blue. She paints my nails. I have 1 blue nail. Don't make it weird. Then, after a moment, lower on the page, because it was easier to write than to say and Hedwig wouldn't tease him, I read it twice. Both parts. I'm watching the road. I'm okay. I think I might actually be okay. He tied it to Hedwig's leg, and she gave him a look that managed to convey both that the message was beneath her and that she'd deliver it anyway, and launched out the window into the gray afternoon, white against the pines, until the trees took her. Wednesday found him after the last bell in the cloister where he'd gone to be briefly, blessedly unobserved. She did not announce herself. She was simply there on the bench beside him in her black with her black notebook, having arrived by some method that did not involve being seen to approach. Harry had spent enough years around people who appeared and disappeared that he merely moved over to make room. You handled Bianca well, Wednesday said without preamble. Better than I'd projected. I had you at a 60% chance of either flinching or flirting, both of which would have been fatal. You did neither. You treated her question as legitimate, which disarmed it, and you complimented her loyalty, which she has been starved of acknowledgement for. It was almost manipulative. She looked at him with something that was on her very nearly respect. Where did you learn that? Survival, Harry said. Yes, she made a note. That's what I thought. You have the social reflexes of a hostage. They're excellent reflexes. I'm curious what made them necessary, but I won't ask because you won't answer, and watching you not answer would tell me more than the answer would anyway. She closed the book. I want to talk about the mark. Everyone wants to talk about the mark. Everyone wants to gossip about the mark. I want to talk about it, which is different and more boring and therefore more useful. She angled toward him on the bench, and her dark eyes had the flat, focused quality he was learning to read as her version of intensity. I've been reading. The school's library has a restricted section on Lupin bonding that took me 40 minutes to break into, which is 40 minutes I'll never forgive the lock for. A true mark is not, as the romantics insist, merely a metaphysical wedding ring. It's a channel, a standing connection between 2 nervous systems. Do you understand what that means? No. It means that when you are afraid, she will know. When you are hurt, she will feel the shape of it, if not the cause, and the reverse. She let that sit. The bond is an organ you grew overnight without consenting to it, and like any organ, it can be turned against the body it lives in. You are being hunted. You told Enid that, and Enid, being Enid, heard the part where you needed protecting and skipped the part where you just told her she's now a door into you that your enemies can knock on. The cloister was cold, and the light had gone the deep blue of a winter afternoon, giving up on itself. Beyond the wall a fountain ran, and Harry remembered distantly that one of the fountains here was not water. I know, Harry said quietly. I worked it out last night. Of course you did. You're not stupid. You're just outnumbered. Wednesday studied him with the flat patience of a clockmaker deciding where to begin. Here is my proposal. You have spent your life being protected by people who decided what was good for you without telling you the plan. I find that arrangement contemptible, so I propose the opposite. You and I, and eventually Enid, once she's finished being delighted long enough to be useful, will treat this bond as what it is. A tactical reality with assets and liabilities. We map it. We learn its range, its limits, what feeds it, and what dampens it. We take the thing your enemies would exploit and make it the thing they never saw coming. Her mouth moved the single millimeter that, on Wednesday Addams, constituted a smile. I have been catastrophically bored at this school. You have brought me a puzzle with teeth. I'd take it as a personal favor if you didn't get murdered before I finished solving it. Harry looked at her. He had arrived at Nevermore intending to be no one, and instead he had somehow acquired a werewolf who would lose fights for him, a siren who reserved judgment, a vampire who slid him clementines, and now a girl in funeral black offering in the plainest possible terms, to help him turn his own heart into a weapon the dark wouldn't expect. Why, he asked, are all of you being like this? Wednesday considered the question with the gravity she gave to everything. Because you walked in pretending to be ordinary, she said, and ordinary people don't count the exits the way you do. We're outcasts, Harry. We can smell our own across a crowded room. The only person here who genuinely believes you're a dull transfer student is Ajax, and Ajax believes ferns have an inner life. She stood and smoothed her skirt, and the cloister seemed colder for her rising. Enid is waiting for you on the Ophelia roof. She thinks I don't know about the roof. She has brought a second blanket and rehearsed something casual to say. Try to look surprised. The roof of Ophelia Hall was reached by a window that did not, technically, open and a climb that broke, by Harry's count, 4 separate rules, and Enid had laid claim to a flat sheltered shelf of lead behind a gable where the wind couldn't reach. The whole valley fell away below in folds of dark pine, and the lights of Jericho glittered small and far in the bottom of the bowl. She had brought the loud plaid blanket and a second one, navy-stitched with stars, and a fresh thermos and the zippered case, and she had arranged it all with the same fussy care he'd heard through his door at dawn. When his head came up over the gable, she lit up brighter than the town below. "You found it," Wednesday told me. "Wednesday is a snitch, and I love her." Enid patted the blanket. "Sit. You can see the entire valley from up here. That's Jericho, full of normal people who think we're a posh school for rich weirdos," which is accurate. The bright cluster is Main Street, the dark patch is the lake, and that one there. She pointed to a single light burning steady on a far ridge, away from the town, where no road ran. "That one I don't know, it's new. It wasn't there a week ago. I noticed lights." Harry followed her finger to the far light. It sat alone on the dark ridge, patient and unblinking, and something he had no name for moved through him and was gone, the animal twitch of a person who'd survived this long by attending to the one detail that refused to fit. "Probably a hunting cabin," he said. "Probably." She said it easily, but she didn't look away from the light either, and he understood that her not looking away was a wolf's version of his own. They held the wrong light between them for a moment, neither naming it, and then she shook herself and reached for the zippered case, and the moment let go. "Okay, hold still. I've wanted to do this all day, and I made myself wait so it wouldn't be weird, and now it's dark and we're on a roof, so it's the exact right amount of weird." She unzipped the case, and it was ranked with little bottles, 100 colors of them, ordered like ammunition. "Give me the marked hand." "Why?" "Because." She took his right hand without waiting and turned it palm down, and the crescent warmed where her thumb crossed it. She chose a blue so electric it seemed to make its own light. Pack thing. When the wolf marks someone, the family paints them. A color so the world knows they're claimed and cherished, not just claimed. My grandmother used thread. She'd tie a colored cord at the wrist. My mom uses polish. She's modern. Enid uncapped the bottle, and the brush hovered over the nail of his ring finger, and she looked up, and the asking arrived in her eyes even though she'd already taken the hand. "Can I?" "You can say no. The cocoa wasn't a contract, and this isn't one either. But I'd like the whole school to see one blue nail tomorrow and understand that somebody on this earth thinks you're worth the good polish." Harry looked at his own hand resting in hers, steady, the crescent glowing faintly between her fingers, the brush waiting, the valley black below and one wrong light burning on a far ridge, and the cold up here clean, and the girl beside him warm as a banked hearth, asking leave to mark him a second time in a way nobody could mistake for an accident. "One nail," he said. "One nail." She painted it, the brush moving slow and sure, her tongue caught between her teeth, and when she finished she blew on it to dry it and held his hand up to the distant town glow to admire her work, and the blue caught the light and shone. "There," she said softly, "now you match the sky." She didn't let go of his hand. She never did when she had it. She held on the way other people held a railing on a height. "Tell me something true, anything. It doesn't have to be the big stuff. I'm not going to ask about whoever's hunting you, not tonight. You'll tell me when you tell me. Just one true thing so I know something about you the gossip doesn't." The wind moved through the pines below. The thermos steamed between them. Harry looked at his one absurd luminous blue nail, the first thing anyone had ever painted on him that wasn't a target. "Nobody's ever waited in a hallway for me before," he said. It came out before he'd decided to let it low, the truest thing he owned. "With cocoa or without cocoa, anybody. The people who were supposed to want me around mostly counted the days until I'd leave. I got used to it. I told myself it was easier not being." He stopped. The word wanted was too large to say out loud on a roof. "I didn't know the hallway was a thing people did until this morning." Enid was quiet. For once, gloriously, she let the silence stand. When he glanced over, she was looking at him with an expression he didn't have a name for and didn't want to ruin by naming. Her eyes bright in a way that had nothing to do with gold, and she squeezed his hand once hard, the crescents flaring warm between them. "Every morning," she said, just that, a vow the size of a single word. "You hear me? Every single morning from now on. You're going to get so sick of finding me in that hallway. You're going to wish I'd sleep in, and I'm not going to, not once, not ever, because somebody should have been in that hallway your whole life and they weren't, and I can't go back and fix it, but I can start tomorrow." She bumped her shoulder against his, gentle, and looked back out over the valley, the town and the lake and the one wrong light. "Now drink your cocoa before it goes cold. Extra cinnamon. It's a whole thing, the cinnamon, you'll see." They stayed on the roof a long time, the two of them under the almost full moon, while the cold came up and the blankets held it off. And far down in the dark a single light burned on a ridge where no road went, steady and patient, and neither of them spoke of it again that night, though both of them in their separate animal ways kept it in the corner of one eye until the moon went down. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, the one who was never chosen, the hallway delivered on its promise. Harry had expected the morning vigils to taper off the way most enthusiasms tapered, a week of cocoa, and then the slow, honest drift of a person discovering that he was, on closer inspection, not worth the early alarm. He kept a private ledger of the days, as he kept ledgers of most things, and he waited for the column to go empty. It did not go empty. On the 9th morning, Enid was in the corridor with the thermos and the loud blanket and a paper bag of something cinnamon, and she was wearing a knitted hat with a pom-pom the size of a fist, and she had clearly been awake long enough to braid a green ribbon into the pink stripe of her hair, and she greeted him with the particular outrage of a person continuing an argument he hadn't known they were having. "You doubted me," she said, handing him the ghost mug. "I can tell, you have a doubting face. You wake up every day a little surprised I'm still here, and every day I'm going to be a little more here until your face gives up. My face doesn't have an opinion. Your face has all the opinions, your mouth just doesn't sign off on them." She settled cross-legged against the opposite wall and patted the floor beside her, and Harry sat because sitting beside her in the cold corridor had become, somewhere in the ledger, the part of the day he stopped bracing for things. "Okay, I brought show and tell." "Don't make it weird, it's already a little weird." She produced from her bag a scrapbook. It was thick and ribbed with everything pressed inside it, the cover collaged in cut paper and stickers, and a photograph of a younger Enid grinning between two enormous shaggy brothers, and she held it on her knees with both hands, suddenly shy in a way that ran counter to every other thing about her. "This is my book," she said. "I make a page for things that matter. Most werewolves keep a packed journal, it's a whole tradition, mine's just more." She gestured at the riot of color. I started a page for you after the quad, and then it became 3 pages, and I want to show you, but if it's too much you can tell me and I'll never mention it again, and we'll both pretend this hat is the only embarrassing thing that happened today." Harry looked at the book. He had spent his life being documented by other people, his face in newspapers, his name in records he'd never seen, a file somewhere with a prophecy folded into it. He had never once been documented by someone who liked him. "Show me," he said. She opened it. The page had his name at the top in bubble letters, Harry, with a tiny hand-drawn crescent dotting nothing in particular, and around it she had arranged the small archaeology of 9 days, a receipt from the greenhouse gift table. A pressed sprig of the moonwort he'd cut, a swatch of the electric blue she'd painted on his nail, dabbed onto the paper. A folded square that turned out to be the wrapper from a clementine, Yoko's clementine, the first thing anyone at this school had handed him. A list in her round handwriting titled "Things Harry Does," with entries, counts the exits, we're working on it, pretends not to be funny, drinks cocoa like it might be taken away, has 3 good answers per day max, conserve. "You wrote down that I count exits," Harry said. "I notice things too, it's not just a Bianca skill." Enid's thumb moved over the page, smoothing a corner that didn't need smoothing. "I put the stuff I want to remember, so that someday when you finally believe me that I'm not going anywhere, I can show you that I was paying attention the whole time, even before you let me." She closed the book on her finger, holding the page. Was that too much? The corridor smelled of cocoa and the faint, sweet glue of the scrapbook, and somewhere below them the school was waking up into its strange, ordinary day, and Harry sat with the fact that a person had spent 9 evenings making a monument to the least monumental things he'd ever done. "No," he said. His voice came out rougher than the word deserved. "It wasn't too much. Add the hat. The hat should be on the page." Enid lit up, the shyness burning off like morning fog. "The hat absolutely goes on the page. I'm going to draw the hat. I'm going to draw it badly, and you're going to love it." She bumped his shoulder, the crescents warming where their hands rested near each other on the cold stone. "Drink your cocoa, exit counter. We've got botanical first, and the lyre fern has been asking about you." They walked down together, and somewhere on the second landing she started talking about her family as she did most things, all at once and in color. 2 older brothers, both enormous, both wolves at 12 like clockwork, both currently terrorizing a forestry program in Oregon. A mother who ran the pack's whole social calendar and had cried actual tears. Every full moon Enid came home unchanged. A father who built her a moon deck on the roof of the house when she was 9 so she'd have somewhere beautiful to fail at shifting, which she had done faithfully for 3 years, while her cousins wolfed out around her like it was nothing. "They were never mean about it," she said, taking the stairs 2 at a time, walking backward so she could watch his face. "That was almost the worst part. They were so nice. Everybody was so gentle with the wolf who couldn't wolf, like I was made of something that might crack. My mom used to say it just means yours is going to be a big one, sweetheart. The late ones always are." She spun back around to take the last flight forward. "And then you walked across a lawn and my big one finally showed up, and I want you to know, the first thing I felt before mine or before any of it was relief that my mom got to be right. 3 years she said it and meant it and probably didn't believe it. I'm going to call her this weekend and say told you so to a woman who told me so." She grinned over her shoulder. "Anyway, that's my deal. You know everyone's whole deal eventually if you let me talk, and you let me talk, which is the nicest thing about you that isn't a secret." There was a tower at the north end of the grounds that the school had stopped using sometime around the Second World War, and Harry had found it in his first week as he found all the quiet places by needing one. It suited him. The stair was sound, the roof held, and the round room at the top had a window facing nothing but pine and sky, and no portraits, and a door that locked. He had begun going there in the gray hour after last class to do the thing he could not do anywhere else at Nevermore, which was magic that wasn't dull on purpose. He was 3 weeks into the habit when Wednesday let herself in without knocking, which was her version of a courtesy, since the lock had been engaged. "You picked it," Harry said, not turning from the window, where a chair was currently rotating slowly in the air at the level of his eyes, untouched. "I dislike that the school thinks a lock is a sentence rather than a suggestion." Wednesday took in the floating chair, the scorch marks he'd cleaned and not cleaned well, the careful arc of pebbles he'd set orbiting a candle flame. Her dark eyes did the cataloging thing. "You've been hiding the interesting half of yourself. Approve of the instinct and resent being on the wrong side of it. Sit the chair down. I want to talk about your magic, and I think better when furniture isn't editorializing." Harry let the chair settle. He had not shown anyone this, not because it was secret exactly, but because at Hogwarts the interesting half had only ever earned him trouble or expectation, and here, for 19 days, nobody had expected anything of him at all, and the relief of that had been its own kind of magic. "What about it?" he said. "You're stronger than you should be." Wednesday sat on the windowsill, spine straight, hands folded. "I've watched wand-trained students. I broke into the same restricted section twice. I know what 15 is supposed to be able to do. You float furniture without a wand and without strain, which is a 7th-year trick at minimum, and you do it while thinking about something else, which isn't a trick at all, it's a temperament." She tilted her head, and it changed. "I've been keeping notes since the quad. You were strong on day 1, you're stronger now. The line goes up, and it goes up on a schedule, and the schedule is Enid." The candle flame lined, though there was no draft. "Say that part again," Harry said. "The bond." Wednesday produced her black notebook and turned it to a page of dense, small script and a graph she had drawn freehand. "A true mark is a channel between two nervous systems, that's established. What the romantic texts bury under flowers is the mechanism. The wolf chooses a mate because a bonded wolf is a stronger wolf, steadier, braver, harder to break. It's not sentiment, it's selection. The pack that mate bonds outlives the pack that doesn't." She tapped the graph. "You're not a wolf, but you grew the same channel. And your magic, which I'd wager has always answered to your nerves, to your fear and your loneliness and your readiness to be hurt, is suddenly running through a system that is being held steady by a creature whose entire purpose is to make you unbreakable." She closed the book. "She isn't just protecting you from the outside, Harry. She's reinforcing the floor you stand on. You're stronger because, for the first time, some animal part of you has stopped spending half its strength bracing for abandonment." Harry looked at the candle, at the orbit of pebbles he'd hung in the air, at his own steady hands. He had spent years being told his power came from his mother's love, a thing that had happened to him once long ago, that he could neither feel nor add to, a sacrifice he carried like a debt. Nobody had ever suggested his power might also come from love that was ongoing, from being chosen on a Tuesday and again every morning. From a girl in a pom-pom hat building him a monument out of clementine wrappers. "That's a theory," he said. "We should test it." Wednesday's mouth moved at single millimeter. "Now you're speaking my language. I propose controlled separation. We measure your output here, then I send Enid to the far side of the grounds, and we measure again. If the line drops with distance, we've found your range. If it doesn't, we've found something stranger." She paused. "Also, I want to know whether you can send through the channel on purpose, not just leak through it. A bond you can only receive on is a liability. A bond you can speak through is a weapon. You think about everything as a weapon. I think about everything as a thing that will eventually be used against you, which it will, and I'd like us to have used it first." She stood. "I'll fetch Enid. Don't float anything sentimental while I'm gone. It encourages her." They spent the gray hour testing it, the three of them, and it went the way the best afternoons of Harry's life had never been allowed to go, which was usefully. Enid sat in the tower window and then walked the long perimeter of the grounds while Wednesday timed it, and Harry lifted a measured weight of stones and reported the strain, and the numbers told a story none of them said out loud until the candle had burned an inch. At 200 yards the work got harder, at the tree line it got harder still, and the moment Enid turned and started back, before Wednesday's pocket watch could have told him, before any sound or sight, Harry felt the floor under his magic firm up and the stones rose easy, and he knew she was coming home. "Range confirmed," Wednesday said, writing. "And you felt her turn before you could have known. That's not reception. That's the channel running both ways, which means," she looked up, and there was something almost warm in the flat dark of her eyes, "you're going to be able to find her anywhere, and she you, which is a beautiful thing and also exactly the kind of beautiful thing an enemy builds a trap out of. We'll need to talk about that, not today. Today you should go tell her she makes you strong, because she's been pretending not to want you to say it for an hour, and her pretending is wearing on me." Enid, climbing back through the tower window with pine needles in her hair and the cold coming off her coat, looked between the two of them and the candle and the graph in Harry's face, and whatever she read there made her grin so wide it bent the whole room toward her. "You did a science about me," she said, delighted. "You did a whole science." "Wednesday did the science," Harry said. "I just lifted rocks. You lifted rocks harder when I came back." She crossed the room and dropped onto the windowsill beside him, near enough that the cold of her sleeve met the warmth of his, and she looked at the floating pebbles with naked wonder. That's the nicest thing anybody's ever measured. What Wednesday had named a liability, Enid treated as a present someone had forgotten to wrap. You can talk to me, she said when Wednesday explained the second channel, the sending one, and from that hour the lessons became the part of Harry's day he stopped pretending not to look forward to, which was a sentence he would have bet money against a month earlier. They worked in the dead tower. Wednesday ran it like a laboratory, Enid attended it like a birthday. The drill was simple and maddening. Harry sat against one curved wall with his eyes shut and tried to push a single clean thing down the channel, a color, a word, a picture, while Enid sat against the other and reported what arrived. At first nothing arrived, then worse, everything did, a smear of whatever he happened to be feeling, which Enid received with the helpless gladness of a radio finding a station from very far off. Okay, that one was at the cupboard, she said once, going still. I got small and dark and a door. Don't send me that one again, I'll bite the door. I didn't send anything. That's the problem, you leak. You've leaked your whole life and nobody had the receiver. She scooted closer across the boards. New plan, don't push a feeling at me, pick a thing, a real thing, hold it like an object and hand it over. He picked the blue nail. He held it in his mind, the electric absurd blue of it, and imagined laying it across her open palm, and on the far side of the room Enid drew a breath and looked down at her own hand. Blue, she whispered. You gave me blue, it's right here, I'm holding it. Her eyes shone, undignified and unbothered about it. Do another, do 100. Wednesday's writing, I'm being annoying, do another. They got good at it, the way you get good at a language you have a reason to speak. By the third afternoon, Harry could set a clear image in her hands across the width of the tower. By the fifth, he could do it across the grounds, the channel thinning with distance but holding, and they built themselves a private alphabet out of it without meaning to. A single struck glass note, clean and high, that he sent when he wanted her to know he was all right, a double note when he wanted her to come. The blue sent for no reason at all, just to feel her receive it and send back, faint and warm down the wire, the wolf's wordless answer that meant the same thing her mouth said every morning in the hall. It made the school nervous and it made the school talk, but the talk had changed shape over the weeks. Harry had stopped being a rumor and become a fixture, and Nevermore forgave almost anything in a fixture. He had a table now, Enid's table, which had quietly become his table too, and a clementine waiting most days from Yoko, and a running feud with the lyre fern that the whole greenhouse followed like a serial. He had, without deciding to, the thing Sirius had wished for him at the gate, a year where he was a person among people, and the strangeness of it sat on him like a borrowed coat he kept forgetting to take off. Morning the sending nearly ended him was a history lecture so dull the windows seemed to be giving up. Harry, 3 rows back and dying, picked the lyre fern out of his memory, fronds and false sincerity and all, and on pure mischief handed it across the room to Enid, who was supposed to be taking notes and was instead the picture of diligence. She received it mid-sentence, made a sound like a kettle, and had to pretend, with no success whatsoever, that she had been seized by a cough. The teacher paused. The class turned, Enid scarlet and luminous, sent back the only thing she had at hand, which was a feeling, warm and enormous and entirely without words, and it arrived in Harry's chest with the subtlety of a thrown pie, and he understood that they were going to have to make rules. You're going to get us both detention, he told her after, in the corridor, not sorry. Worth it, you sent me the fern, you used our sacred war channel to send me a fern. She was beaming. I've never been more proud of anyone. It was Bianca who found him at the end of that week, by the trophy case where she had first decided to mistrust him, and she did it on purpose, choosing the spot, which was how Harry knew the conversation mattered before she opened her mouth. I owe you a thing, she said, without preamble, dark water of her hair held back today in a way that made her look older and tireder. Not an apology. I stand by the question was correct. But I've watched for 3 weeks, and the mark's real, and the wizard's real, and the way you handled the fern incident instead of letting Enid take the fall by herself told me the rest. She glanced down the hall, the reflexive check of a person who ran a club built on knowing who was listening. So here's the thing I owe you. There's been a man in Jericho, in town at the Weather Vane 3 days running, asks the staff gentle questions about the school. Old English, beard you could lose a hand in, eyes that are kind in a way that doesn't reach anything, tips well, everyone likes him. She watched Harry's face change and gave a grim little nod. Yeah, I thought that name might land. He hasn't come up the road, he's being patient, polite, letting the town tell him things for free. She straightened. I run the gossip at this school, Harry. Nobody asks questions in my town without it reaching me. Whatever's coming for you, it's already taken a table and ordered the coffee. I thought the one who didn't flinch should hear it from someone who isn't trying to manage how he feels about it. Thank you, Harry said and meant it. Don't, but something in her eased. Just keep her whole. She nodded once at the crescent on his hand, and there was an old ache under the cool of her, the ache of someone who had held a friend's hair 3 times and learned the exact weight of that friend's hopes. She's been let down by people who looked a lot more reliable than you. Prove me wrong about you, and I'll never bring it up again. That's the best offer I make. He carried Bianca's old Englishman with the kind eyes up to the roof that night the way you carry a stone in your shoe. And so when Enid handed him the second thermos, the one she'd started making just for him because she'd learned he took his cocoa hotter than was sensible, it undid something he'd been holding, and he heard himself decide all at once that he could not keep letting a person who'd learned how he took his cocoa believe he was only a transfer from a school in Scotland that didn't exist. He told her the rest on the roof that same night, the roof being where true things were allowed, and he did not let himself rehearse it because rehearsing was how brave things turned back into silence. "I want to tell you who's hunting me," he said, "all of it while I've got the nerve." Enid set down her thermos. She didn't reach for him, though he could see her want to. She had learned that too, that he told the truth more easily when he wasn't being held. That touch came after for him and not during. She folded her colorful hands in her lap and gave him the one thing she was worst at giving, which was silence, and she gave it completely. So he told her. He told her about the cupboard under the stairs, said plainly, without the flinch he usually built around it, the years of being the thing his relatives counted the days to be rid of. He told her about a man named Tom Riddle who had decided before Harry could walk that the world had room for only one of them, and who had taken Harry's parents apart to get to a baby and failed, and left a scar, and come back year by year, more wrong each time, until a graveyard and a knife and a body built out of stolen pieces. He told her about the prophecy, the way it had been read to him not as a warning but as a job description, a thing that made him a weapon before it made him a person. He told her about the headmaster who loved him. He believed that, who loved him and had also raised him like livestock raised, gentle for a purpose, kind and careful, and never once asking whether the lamb wanted the field it was being fattened for. He told her the part he had never said to anyone, that the worst of it wasn't the danger. The worst of it was that everyone who'd ever decided to keep him had been keeping him for a reason. To win a war, to fulfill a prophecy, to discharge a duty to his dead parents. He had been wanted the way a tool is wanted. And he had stopped, somewhere around 14, being able to tell the difference between being loved and being needed for something, and he had stopped expecting to find out. He ran out of words near the end, which he hadn't planned for, and the silence after was the longest she had ever given him. When he looked over, Enid was not crying, which he'd half expected. She was very still, and the gold was up in her eyes, all the way up, brighter than the night he'd arrived, and her painted nails had gone to claws against her own knees without her seeming to notice, 4 thin lines pressed white into the denim, and when she spoke her voice came out low and even and entirely unlike her, a voice from the old part underneath. "Tell me their names," she said. "Enid, not so I can hurt them. I can't reach them, I know that they're an ocean away, and one of them's a dark lord and the other runs your whole world." The claws flexed. "I want their names because I want to know exactly the shape of every single person who looked at you and saw a tool. I want to hold it. I want to carry the whole list around so that I never, not for 1 second, forget what you've been surviving while everyone clapped for how brave you were." She turned to him, and the gold was wet now, but it wasn't grief, it was something with a spine in it. "You think you can't tell the difference between being loved and being needed. Okay, I'm going to make it real easy for you. Here's the difference." She took his hand, the marked one, and pressed it flat over the crescent on her own, the two of them stacked, warm. "Needing you would be wanting you to win a war. I don't care if you ever win anything. I don't need you to be the boy who lived or the chosen anything or a weapon pointed at a bad man. If you wanted to walk off this mountain tonight and open a cocoa stand in a town nobody's ever heard of and never do one single brave thing again, I would carry the sign. That's the difference. They love what you're for. I just love what you are. And I will spend the rest of my extremely long werewolf life making sure you can feel which is which." She was quiet a moment, and the claws eased back into painted nails, and when she went on her voice had lost the spine and found something softer under it. "You said you stopped expecting to find out the difference at 14. She pressed her thumb once over the crescent. "I want you to know I heard that part the loudest. Not the Dark Lord, not the headmaster, not even the cupboard, though I'm going to be unwell about the cupboard for a while. The part where a 14-year-old decided, all by himself, that he'd never get to know if anyone wanted him for nothing. That's the part I'd undo if I could only fix one, and I can't undo it, but I can outlast it. I'm very good at outlasting things. Ask the wolf that took 3 years to show up." The wind came up off the valley and moved through the pines, and the wrong light burned on its far ridge, and Harry sat on a cold roof with his hand stacked on hers and discovered that the thing he'd braced against his whole life, the being seen, did not hurt the way he'd always assumed it would. "Mine," Enid said, but quietly this time, nothing like the quad, no audience, no flag planted in the ground. She said it the way you'd say a fact you'd checked. She pressed it into the back of his hand with her thumb. "You hear how I'm saying it, not so they know, so you do." He turned his hand over under hers and held on, and for once did not count a single exit. "I hear you," he said. The wrongness came down off the ridge 11 days later, and it was Wednesday who felt it first, because Wednesday felt that kind of thing the way other people felt a change in the weather. She found Harry and Enid at the edge of the woods after dinner, where Enid had been teaching him with enormous patience and a stick, the rudiments of how a wolf read a forest, which smells meant deer and which meant rot and which meant a person had passed and tried not to be smelled. Wednesday came out of the dusk already talking, which she never did, and her face had gone a shade paler than its considerable baseline. I had a vision in the dining hall, she said. I dropped a fork. People noticed. I need you both to not make this a thing while I tell you, because it's already a thing. She stopped in front of them. I saw the woods, these woods, and something walking through them that doesn't have a heartbeat. I touched the door of the kitchen and I saw it again, closer. Whatever it is, it's been on the ridge, and tonight it came down, and it's looking for a way through the wards, and it's patient in a manner I find professionally insulting because patience is mine. Enid had gone still beside Harry, her nose up, reading the wind, and her hand found his sleeve. She's right, there's something. I thought it was a dead deer up the slope. I've been smelling it for a week and telling myself deer. It's not deer. It doesn't smell like anything that's supposed to be able to walk. Harry knew before he asked, with the certainty of a person who'd been to the graveyard. What does it look like? Gray, Wednesday said. Wet, like a person left in water. Moving like the cold doesn't reach it because nothing reaches it. She watched his face. You know what it is. Infurious. The word tasted like the graveyard. A corpse, reanimated, sent out on a task in a leash. They don't think, they don't tire, they don't bleed because there's nothing in them to bleed. He uses them as scouts when he doesn't want to spend a living servant. It means, he stopped, because the thing he had been hoping for 3 weeks was a coincidence had just finished not being one. It means somebody who knows how to make them has decided to look for something in these woods, and the only thing in these woods worth a Dark Lord's corpse is me. The dusk had thickened into real dark while they talked, and out in the trees, 100 yards down the slope, a branch broke under a weight that placed its feet, the way nothing living placed its feet, evenly, without care, in no hurry at all. Harry's mind did the thing it had learned to do in the half-second before bad choices, which was go very cold and very fast. He could end the scout. He knew the fire that unmade the dead, and at this range, with the floor of his magic firm under him in a way it had never been before Enid, he was fairly sure he could do it without a wand and without warning. The wanting to was enormous. He set it down. A thing on a leash was a thing with someone watching through it, and the one move worse than letting an enemy see your school was letting an enemy see exactly what you could do to defend it. Better, the corpse reported, a frightened boy and a loud girl. Better, Riddle spent another week believing he understood the board. The only advantage Harry had ever held over the enemy who'd hunted him since the cradle was that Riddle always assumed he already knew everything, and an enemy who assumes he knows everything can be taught wrong on purpose. Don't, he said low, catching the growl building in Enid before it crested. Don't show it your teeth, not the real ones. It's a camera. Let it film something boring. It came onto our ground, she said, not moving, the gold full up. And it's going to walk off our ground having learned nothing it can use. That costs them more than a fight would. He put 2 fingers against her wrist, the marked one, and sent down the channel the cleanest thing he had, the struck glass note. I'm all right, I'm thinking, stay with me. He felt her receive it, felt the growl bank down to embers without going out. Enid stepped in front of Harry anyway, because some instructions the wolf would take and that one it would not. She did it without drama and without asking, simply put her body between his and the dark, and the gold came up in her eyes, and a sound started in her chest that Harry had not heard from her before, low and continuous, an engine turning over. Her painted nails were claws again. The cold went out of her shoulders and something older came into them. It's leashed, you said, she said low, not taking her eyes off the trees. So somebody's holding the other end, watching through it maybe, probably. Good. She raised her voice, not much, just enough to carry into the dark to whatever wet gray thing was placing its even feet among the pines, and threw it to whoever stood at the far end of the leash. Then they can hear me, the growl threaded under her words. You came a long way to look at what's mine. Take a good look. Tell the one who sent you what you saw standing in front of him. Her claws flexed. Tell him she wasn't afraid. In the trees, the thing stopped. For a moment, nothing in the woods moved, not the wet gray scout, not the 3 of them at the tree line, not the wind. And then from down the slope there came a sound that did not belong to the Inferius at all, that came from much farther off, from the ridge, from the far end of the leash, carried impossibly clear across the cold air. A thin, high, pleased exhalation, almost a sigh. The sound of a patient hunter being told at last that his information was good. The Inferius turned and walked back up the slope, unhurried, the way it had come, and the woods let it go. Weems sealed the school that night, and she did it without a single bell, which Harry understood later was the most frightening thing she could have done, because bells were for drills and silence was for the real thing. She gathered them in her office, the 3 of them, and Yoko, because Yoko had appointed herself, and a letter was already open on the desk when they arrived, the wax broken, a dog's paw pressed in black. It reached me an hour before your woodwalk did, Weems said, and she slid the letter across to Harry, and her pale eyes did not blink. Your godfather is not a calm man, but he is a careful one, and he has written me 3 times this month, and this is the first time he has written in a hand I'd describe as unsteady. Read it, then I'll tell you what I intend to do about the thing on my ridge. The letter was Sirius's sprint gone tight and small. Harry, read fast. Albus knows. I don't know how, and I'll find out and skin whoever sold it, but he knows you're at a school in the States for outcasts. He said it to Molly's face, thinking I wasn't in the next room. Said it gently in the voice he uses for things he's already decided. He is somewhere he feels safe, and feeling safe is precisely the danger. He must come back where I can guard him. Guard, he means use. He's coming, Harry, or he's sending someone he trusts to be persuasive, and he'll have 100 good reasons, and every one of them will be true, and the sum of them will still be a cage. And worse, there's chatter, the bad kind. Riddle's people have been buying favors from a goblin clan that does business across the water, asking about American sanctuaries, asking specifically about a school that takes the unusual. I think they were already looking. I think Albus saying your location out loud in a room with a leak in it just told them where to point. I'm sorry, I tried to keep you small and the world keeps insisting on you. Stay behind Larissa. Trust the wolf. Her headmistress's letters about her have made even me believe in something. We're coming as fast as the wards will let us. Don't be brave, be alive. Harry set the letter down. The office was very quiet. Yoko had taken off her dark glasses, which he had never seen her do, and her eyes were old and steady on him. So they both know, Harry said. Dumbledore and Voldemort at the same time. One wants to take me home and one wants to take me apart, and the thing on your ridge is here to confirm I'm the right address. Yes, Weems said. She did not soften it, and he was grateful, the way he'd been grateful in the corridor on his first day. And I will tell you what I told your guardians I would tell you, because you've earned the courtesy of strategy instead of comfort. She folded her hands. Nevermore has stood for 3 centuries because it is harder to reach than it is worth reaching, and because no one who has tried has found the school willing to be only a building. The wards will hold the dead thing on the ridge. It cannot cross, it can only watch, and watching is not nothing, but it is not a breach. What I cannot ward against is the living. A persuasive old man at my gate with the law on his side, a clever dark servant who walks in wearing a face I trust. Those come through people, and people are the one thing I cannot lock. Her gaze moved over the 4 of them, the wolf and the wizard and the seer and the vampire, and something in it shifted from headmistress to general, which is why I am not going to lock you away. I am going to do the more dangerous and more honest thing. I am going to let the 4 of you become exactly as formidable as I suspect you already are, and I am going to make this school ready, and when they come, whichever of them comes first, we are going to be the thing they did not plan for. For a moment no one spoke. The wind worked at the dark windows. I'm in, Yoko said first, putting her glasses back on, which was how Harry understood she decided something and was done showing her face about it. I've been aboard immortal at a boarding school for longer than I'll admit. A dark lord and a meddling wizard is the most interesting term I've had in a decade. I have contacts in 3 time zones who owe me favors and no scruples about waking them. I have already begun, Wednesday said. I have a list of every entrance to these grounds, including the 4 the administration believes are sealed and are not, and a theory about which the old man will try first, because men who are certain they are loved always walk in the front door. I'd like permission to make the front door interesting. Granted, Weems said, within reason, and then after a pause, define reason narrowly and assume I will object, and Wednesday almost looked pleased. Enid said nothing for a moment. She was looking at Harry, and when she spoke it was to him and not to the room, though the room heard it. You spent your whole life having people decide your war for you, she said. So I'm not going to. This is your call, not mine. You want to run, we run. Tonight I'll carry the bags. You want to stand, I stand in front of you so hard they'll have to go through 140 pounds of werewolf who is extremely motivated. Either way I'm where you are, just tell me which. Harry looked around the office at the general in white and the immortal in dark glasses and the seer with her list of unsealed doors and the wolf who had handed him, of all the impossible things, a choice. We stand, he said. I'm done being moved around the board by people who think they know best. If they want me, they can come to the one place that decided I was worth keeping. Enid's hand found Harry's under the desk, and the crescents warmed, and out past the dark windows, up on the cold ridge where no road went, a single patient light burned on, no longer a mystery, watching the school that had just decided to stop hiding from it. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. Grandfather's steel. He came on a Thursday, in the gap between the snow ending and the cold settling in to stay, and he came the way Bianca had said he would, up the front road, on foot, alone, a tall old man in a traveling cloak the gray-blue of weather, with a beard you could indeed lose a hand in, and a stride that ate the distance without seeming to hurry. Harry watched him come from the window of the dead tower, where Wednesday had installed a brass telescope she declined to explain, and he knew the walk before he could make out the face, the way you know a voice through a wall. He had spent 4 years learning that walk. It belonged to the only person alive who had ever made him feel in the same breath perfectly safe and entirely used. That's him, Harry said. I gathered. Wednesday lowered the telescope. He's early. I had him for Saturday. Men who are certain of their welcome usually keep you waiting to teach you to want them. This one wants you to see him walk up alone and unafraid into a school full of monsters. It's a performance, and it's a good one, and the worst thing about a good performance is that the performer often believes it too. She looked at Harry. You're not going down there. I'm going down there. You're going down there, she agreed, having tested the lock and found it engaged. I had to check. Enid's already at the gate. She got there before the wards finished announcing him. Try to arrive before she does something we'll all have to explain. Enid was at the gate. She was standing inside the iron in the cold with her hands loose at her sides and her chin up. And she had not changed, not all the way, but the gold was banked high in her eyes and her painted nails had thickened at the tips, and she was doing the thing Harry had come to recognize as her whole self organized into a single purpose. She was between the old man on the road and the school at her back, a bright small figure in a coat the color of a parrot, declining with her entire body to move. Weems arrived as Harry did, white coat sweeping, and she put one hand on Enid's shoulder, not to pull her back, only to be counted in the line. The three of them stood inside the closed gate, and on the far side of the iron, an arm's length away and a world away, Albus Dumbledore stopped and folded his hands inside his sleeves and smiled at Harry with so much real warmth that it hurt to look at. Harry, he said, oh my dear boy, you're well, you're better than well, you've color in your face I've not seen in years. His blue eyes moved over the crescent on Harry's hand, and a sadness crossed them, gentle and immense. And it's true, then. I had hoped the reports exaggerated, they so rarely do where you're concerned. Headmaster, Harry said, Albus, please, I think we're past titles, you and we've been through too much. He inclined his head to Weems with the courtesy of one monarch to another. Larissa, you've kept him beautifully, I find I can't even be angry, and I came a very long way intending to be. The smile again, rueful now, may I come in, I've walked from the town. I'm an old man, and there's a great deal to say, and I would rather not say it through offense like a debt collector. No, said Enid. It landed in the cold air, flat and total. Dumbledore's gaze moved to her with the mild interest of a man noticing a new flower in a familiar garden, and Harry felt the whole weight of that attention shift onto the girl who had put herself in its path, and he understood that the next 30 seconds would teach Dumbledore everything he intended to learn about whether Enid could be moved. You must be Miss Sinclair, Dumbledore said, warm, courtly. I've heard such things, the wolf who waited. May I say it is a rare and lovely magic you carry, and Harry could not be more fortunate in the heart that chose him. I mean that without a grain of irony. I have spent a long life watching that boy be wanted for what he could do. To see him wanted for what he is must be a great, you don't get to say what he is. Enid's voice didn't rise, that was the frightening part. It stayed low, and even the voice from underneath. You came up the road being kind, you're really good at it. You've probably never lost an argument you started with kindness in your whole life. So I'm going to be the first one who doesn't play, because I can smell what you actually want, and it's standing behind me, and you're not having it. My dear girl, I want only his safety, then you'd be glad he's safe. You'd have written a nice letter and sent the right scarf and slept easy knowing 140 pounds of werewolf sleeps in the next hall. She tilted her head, and the gold flared. But you walked from town, alone, to stand at the gate where everyone could see the brave old man come for his boy. You don't want him safe, you want him back. There's a whole entire ocean of difference, and I'm standing in it, and the water's fine. For a moment Dumbledore said nothing. The wind moved his beard, and then he did the thing that made him dangerous, the thing no villain ever did, which was look genuinely deeply moved. You're quite right, he said softly. I did want to be seen. An old vanity, I'm full of them, and you love him without a single thought for what he's for, which is more than I have managed, God forgive me, in all the years I've had the keeping of him. He bowed his head to her, and it was not a performance, or it was a performance so fused with truth that the seam had vanished. I withdraw my request to enter. I'll say what I came to say here in the cold at the fence, like a debt collector, since that is closer to honest. He lifted his eyes to Harry. But I will say it because there are things you do not know, Harry, that change everything, and that you deserve to hear from someone who loves you before you hear them from someone who does not. Then say it, Harry said. What followed, Harry would think later, was the most skillful thing he had ever watched a person do, and he had watched Voldemort talk a graveyard into worship. Dumbledore did not argue. Arguing would have meant conceding there was a fight. Instead he told a story, and he told it gently, and he built it the way a tide builds, each sentence arriving soft and withdrawing and leaving the ground a little more his. He spoke of the war, of the names already lost since summer, some of which Harry knew, and one of which made his hands go still on the iron. He spoke of Riddle not as a monster, but as a problem, a thing that would keep killing in widening circles until it was stopped, and of the prophecy which he recited now in full for the first time, the words Harry had only ever had summarized, the neither can live, the power the Dark Lord knows, not the marking as an equal. He laid it out like a man laying out a map of a country on fire, and he did not once say you must, and the not saying was louder than saying. I did not come to drag you home, Dumbledore said. You're nearly of age in the eyes of magic and past it in every way that matters. I came because you are the only living person the prophecy names, and because while you are here learning to be happy, which I want for you, which I have always wanted for you and never known how to give, People are dying who would not die if you stood where the prophecy says you must stand. I came to tell you the truth and then to let you choose, which is the one thing I never let you do, and which I have come a very long way to do correctly at last, even if it costs me the having of you." He spread his old hands. "Stay and be loved, and let the war find its own end, or come and be the end of it. I will think no less of you for the first, but you should choose it knowing the price, and the price is other people's children. That is all, that is the whole of what I came to say." The cold sat over the gate. Behind Harry, the school had gathered at a distance, a crowd of the strange held silent by something they could feel was larger than gossip. Weems said nothing. She had decided, Harry understood, to let him stand in this himself, which was its own kind of faith. Enid had not moved from in front of him, but he could feel her down the channel now, a steady banked warmth. I'm here, whatever you pick, I'm here." And Harry looked at the old man who loved him, and he felt the pull of it, the genuine terrible pull, because the worst thing about Dumbledore's case was that most of it was true. People were dying, the prophecy was real, he could perhaps be the end of it. Every lever the old man had pressed was a lever bolted to something solid. But Harry had spent 3 weeks in a tower learning to think in cold, clean lines, and he had learned something there about the shape of an argument that arrives perfectly assembled. "That was beautiful," Harry said. "I mean that. If you'd said it to me in September, I'd have walked out the gate before you finished, and I'd have thanked you for the chance to die usefully." He let go of the iron and stepped forward level with Enid, his shoulder against hers. "So let me say the part you left out. Not because you forgot it, because you're too honest to say it and too frightened to let me notice it's missing." Dumbledore's blue eyes sharpened, the smallest fraction, the first real attention he'd paid. "You framed it as a choice between being loved and ending the war," Harry said. "Stay and be happy or go and be the end, and it's a perfect frame. It's airtight. Every piece of it is true." He felt the argument open in front of him, the way the magic opened in the tower, clean and certain. "Except a choice has to have 2 real doors, and you only built one. Because if I stay, you've made sure I stay as a coward who let children die for his own happiness. You've poisoned the door marked stay so thoroughly that no decent person could walk through it. That's not offering me a choice, headmaster. That's offering me a cage and painting the bars to look like the sky." "Harry," Dumbledore's voice gentled further, which Harry had learned to read as a man reaching for higher ground. "I would never. You already did. Not on purpose, you're not cruel, that's what makes it work." Harry kept his voice steady, because the steadiness was the wolf's gift, the floor under him firm in a way it had never been when he'd faced this man before. "You raised me to be exactly this useful and exactly this guilty. You kept the prophecy from me until you needed it, then handed it over the moment it became leverage. You let me grow up believing I was nobody so that when you finally told me I was the only one, I'd be so grateful to matter that I'd never ask whether mattering and being used are the same thing wearing different coats." He took a breath and it came easy. "So here's the third door, the one you didn't build because you couldn't make yourself believe it existed. I'm not going to stay and let children die, and I'm not going to go and be your weapon. I'm going to fight Tom Riddle because you're right that someone has to, and the prophecy says it's me, but I'm going to do it from here, on my terms, with people who chose me before they knew I was useful for anything. And you're going to help me with everything you have, with every secret you've been hoarding to dole out as motivation, because you love me, and because the alternative is you walk back down that road having taught me one final time that the people who say they love me only mean it as long as I'm pointed in the right direction." The silence at the gate had a different quality now. The crowd of outcasts had stopped being an audience and become witnesses, which is a heavier thing. Weems had turned her head a few degrees toward Harry, and her pale eyes held something he had not earned from her before. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment, and the warmth did not leave his face, but something moved behind it, deep and slow, the grinding of a man revising a plan he had carried for 15 years. "You've grown a strategist's tongue," he said at last, quietly. "I wonder where." "A girl handed me a floor to stand on," Harry said. "It turns out you think more clearly when you're not falling." "Yes," Dumbledore murmured. "Yes, I imagine you do." He looked, for the first time, old in a way that was not a performance, the weariness of a man who has spent his whole life being the cleverest person at the gate and has just stopped being it. "You understand that I cannot simply hand you the keys to a war and walk away. There are things I know that are dangerous in the knowing. There are reasons I have kept them close that are not all of them selfish. Then tell me the unselfish ones and let me weigh them like a person. That's all I've ever wanted from you, not to be protected from the truth, to be trusted with it." And it was at that moment, into that cold, balanced silence with the whole school holding its breath, that 2 figures came up the front road at a dead run, one of them shouting Harry's name in a voice gone ragged with relief and fury in equal measure. And Harry turned, and his chest did the thing it had no name for because it was Sirius, coat flying, with Remus astride behind him, and they had come as fast as the wards would let them, exactly as promised. Sirius did not slow for Dumbledore. He went straight to the gate, and Weems opened it for him without a word, and he came through it and took Harry by both shoulders and looked at him the way a man looks at a thing he had prepared on the long road to find broken. "You're all right," Sirius said. It wasn't a question, but it needed answering anyway. "You're all right." "I'm all right," Harry said. "Sirius, I'm all right." "Look at me, I'm—" and then he stopped, because Sirius had pulled him into a hug that cracked something in Harry's ribs. The careful architecture he kept his composure on, and Harry stood in the cold at the gate of Nevermore with his godfather's arms around him and his face in the shoulder of a coat that still hung wrong, and he let it. For once, in front of everyone, he let it. Over Sirius's shoulder, he watched Remus stop in front of Dumbledore. The two old friends regarded each other, and there was history in it, decades of it, war and loss, and a long table where they had once all been young together. Remus did not raise his voice. Remus never raised his voice, but what he said carried in the cold. "You taught me, Albus," Remus said, "when I was 11 and certain I was a monster, that the measure of a person is what they do with the power they have over those weaker than themselves. You gave me a place when the world wanted me drowned. I have loved you my whole life for it." He paused. "And then you took the orphan of your two dead friends and you raised him lame and lonely so he'd be easy to aim. I watched you do it. I told myself you knew best, because you always knew best, because it was easier to trust you than to trust myself. I will carry that to my grave, my friend, the watching and the saying nothing." His tired eyes did not waver. "I'm saying something now." He stays. He fights from a place that loves him, with people at his back who die before they'd spend him. You can be part of that, or you can be the thing it protects him from. Choose well. You taught me that too. For a long moment Dumbledore said nothing at all. Then he laughed very softly with no bitterness in it, a sound almost of relief. "Both of you," he said, "and the wolf and Larissa and Harry himself, all arrived at the same conclusion and all braced to fight me for it, and not one of you needed to. Do you know, I think this is the first room in 40 years where everyone has told me the truth at once. I had forgotten how it felt, like cold water, like being young." He drew his cloak straighter, and when he looked at Harry again, the grandfather had set and the steel had come up, but it was a clean steel now, pointed outward. "Very well, you will fight from here, Harry, on your terms, and I will give you what I have, not as your handler. As your ally, which is a thing I have not been to anyone in a very long time, and which I find, standing in the cold being told off by my dearest friends, I would rather like to try." "Just like that," Harry said, wary, because nothing with this man was ever just like that. "No," Dumbledore admitted, "not just like that. Because there is one more thing, and it is the dangerous thing, and the kind grandfather in me has spent 20 minutes deciding whether to spare you it, and the ally I have just promised to be does not have that luxury." He glanced at the gathered school, at Weems, at the wolf who had not once left her place in front of Harry through any of it. "It should not be said at a gate. It can be said in my office," Weems said. Her voice had changed. The general had come back into it. "All of you now. The school has had enough theater, and I find I no longer like the quality of the quiet on that ridge." Weems' office held them all, barely. Dumbledore took the chair she offered with the gravity of a man who knew he was about to spend the last of his moral credit. Sirius stood at Harry's shoulder and would not be moved from it. Remus took the window. Wednesday occupied a corner she had not been invited to and was not asked to leave. And Enid sat beside Harry with her hand on the arm of his chair, not holding him, just touching the wood he touched, close enough that the crescents kept a low warmth between them. "Tom Riddle should be dead," Dumbledore began. "He has been killed, in a manner of speaking, once already, the night he came for you. And he is not dead, and the reason he is not dead is the dangerous knowing I have carried alone." He folded his hands. He divided his soul. Deliberately, with the worst magic there is, the kind that requires murder as its hinge. He tore pieces of himself away and hid them in objects scattered across the world, so that as long as a single piece survives, he cannot truly die. We call such an object a Horcrux. I believe he made several. While they exist, he is unkillable. Stop him, strike him down, and he will hang on as less than a ghost and crawl back, year by year, as you have seen him do. This is the war's real shape. Not a man to be defeated, a man to be dismantled piece by hidden piece before the final blow means anything at all. The office had gone very still. Sirius's hand tightened on the back of Harry's chair. "That's why he didn't die in the graveyard," Harry said slowly. "Why none of it ever finishes. That is why." Dumbledore's blue eyes were steady and terribly kind. "And now the part I have spared you and can spare you no longer." He looked at the scar, the old thin line on Harry's brow, in a way Harry had felt 100 times and finally understood. The night he tried to murder you and the curse turned back on him, he was already in pieces, already torn nearly to nothing. And a fragment of him, a sliver of that ruined soul, had nowhere to go, and so it went into the nearest living thing. It went into you, Harry. The scar is not a wound, it is a door. There is a splinter of Tom Riddle living behind your eyes, and it is how you have dreamed his dreams and felt his furies, and it is how his dead scout walked straight to these woods. He does not need a map to you. You are carrying a piece of him, and a thing always knows where its own pieces are. Nobody spoke. Outside, the wind worked at the ridge. Harry sat with it. He waited to feel the floor drop, the old vertigo, the certainty that he was contaminated, marked, doomed, a thing with a death sentence sewn into his forehead. He had spent his life being told he was special in ways that turned out to be sentences. This was only the largest one. The floor did not drop. He noticed it with a kind of distant wonder, even as Sirius made a low broken sound behind him, and Remus turned from the window with his face gone gray. The floor did not drop because the floor was not his anymore, not entirely. There was a warmth at the back of his hand and a banked steadiness running down a channel into his chest, and the wolf on the other end of it had felt the words land and was already, wordlessly, furiously, holding him up. "So I'm a Horcrux," Harry said. His voice came out level. "An accidental one, which means the same thing as the others. While the piece of him in me survives, he can't fully die. Which means," he made himself say it because not saying things was how they grew teeth in the dark, "which means to finish him, the piece in me has to go too, and the simplest way for that piece to go is for me to." "Harry," Sirius said, wrecked. "That," said Dumbledore, "is what I believed for years. I built a great many quiet, terrible plans on the belief that at the last you would have to be willing to fall, and that I would have to be willing to let you, and I have hated myself for it in a steady, manageable way that let me keep functioning, which is the worst sentence I have ever spoken aloud, and I find I am glad to be rid of it." He leaned forward, and now there was something in his face Harry had never seen there, an old man astonished against his will. "But I no longer believe it. Because I have studied that fragment through your scar for 4 years, and it has always been a cold and hungry thing, and I came up that road today braced to feel it strong. And it is not strong, Harry, it is starving. Something is crowding it out. Something has been pouring into you steadily for weeks that the splinter of Tom Riddle cannot abide and cannot compete with, and I felt it the moment I saw the mark on your hand." Every eye in the room went to Enid. She had gone very still under the attention, the bright, fierce girl, and she looked at Dumbledore with the gold low in her eyes, and she said carefully, like a person checking the ice, "You're saying me. You're saying being," she glanced at Harry, "being claimed, being wanted for nothing, that's doing something to the bad thing inside him." "I am saying," Dumbledore said gently, "that a soul which is fully inhabited has no vacancy to let. For 14 years there was room in that boy for a splinter of darkness because the world had hollowed him out and left the room empty. And then a wolf looked at him across a lawn and moved in with her color and her noise and her absolute refusal to leave, and began, without knowing it, the one magic I never could perform with all my learning. She is filling the house, and the squatter is being pushed toward the door." He sat back. "I do not yet know if that means the fragment can be removed without taking him with it. No one has ever tried, no one has ever had the tool. But for the first time in 14 years I have reason to hope that the child I love does not have to die for the world to live. And I came here to take that hope away from him in the name of protecting him, and I have never been more glad to fail at anything in my life." For a moment no one moved. Then Enid turned to Harry, and her eyes were wet and blazing, and she took his marked hand in both of hers, full grip, no hesitation, and she pressed the crescents together hard. "Okay," she said, unsteady, fierce. "Okay, new job. I already had the one job, which is you, but now I've got a specific assignment inside the job, and the assignment is I am going to love you so loud and so constant and so completely that there is not 1 square inch of you left for that thing to stand on. You hear me? I'm going to crowd it out the door and slam the door and paint the door blue." A laugh broke out of her, wet and defiant. "It picked the wrong house. It moved into a house and then a werewolf bought the place. Bad investment, worst investment. I'm so sorry for it, actually, it's going to have such a bad time." And Harry, who had just been told there was a piece of the creature who killed his parents living behind his eyes, found that he was, impossibly, almost smiling because the girl holding his hand had heard death sentence and immediately declared war on it with interior decorating. They made a plan in Weem's office while the light failed, and it was the strangest war council Harry had ever sat in, because for the first time he was at the table instead of on it. Dumbledore would hunt the Horcruxes. He had spent years tracing them in secret, half certain, and he laid out what he knew without hoarding a single card, which Remus watched him do with the wary attention of a man checking that a habit had truly broken. There were objects old and proud, things Riddle had loved and corrupted. There were places, there was a great deal of danger and a great deal of travel, and it was work for those who could move across the world unseen, which meant the Order, which meant not Harry. "You'll want me to come," Harry said. "It's my war." "It is your war," Dumbledore agreed. "And you will lose it for us if you leave this school, because the moment you step beyond Larissa's wards, the splinter in your scar becomes a beacon Tom can read like a lighthouse, and every Horcrux I might quietly retrieve, he will defend the instant he knows you're in motion. You are most useful to me exactly where you least want to be, safe, surrounded. Loved noisily by a wolf who is, I begin to suspect, doing more damage to our enemy than my entire order combined." He inclined his head to Enid, and it was respect now unmixed. "Stay, grow stronger, let the bond do its slow work on the fragment, and learn, all of you, to hold this place, because I will not lie to you about the rest." "The rest being," Wednesday said from her corner, "that he's coming here. The rest being that he is coming here." Dumbledore's steel was bare now, clean and grim. His scout has confirmed the address. He is proud and patient, and he will not move until he believes he can take the school in a single stroke, because to be repelled from a building full of children would wound the legend he has spent a life building. So he will gather, he will wait for the right night, and then he will come in force to take back the piece of himself he has just learned is being starved out of his reach before the starving finishes. He looked around the room. You have until he is ready. I do not know how long that is. Weeks, I think, not months. Use them. We will, Weems said, and it had the weight of a vow. There's a use in it, Harry said before the room could disperse, and the certainty arrived the way it had at the gate, cold and clean. The scar. You said it's a door, and you said it's two-way. The dreams come through and the location goes out, so it isn't only a leak. It's a line straight into his head that he doesn't know I can hear, and worse, he thinks it only runs his direction. He thinks he's the one reading me. He looked at Dumbledore, which means anything I'm sure of he can feel I'm sure of. If I believe a lie hard enough, he gets the lie, and he gets it stamped with my certainty, which is the one thing he'd never think to doubt, because why would a man doubt the inside of his own splinter? The office went quiet in a new register, the quiet of people watching a tool being picked up by someone who knows what it's for. That is, Dumbledore said slowly, extraordinarily dangerous. To deceive him through the scar, you would have to fool yourself first completely with him listening. A single honest flicker and he sees the whole shape of the trap. Then I learned to fool myself completely. I've had practice. Harry didn't smile when he said it, and Sirius's hand tightened on the chair. He's spent 14 years certain he understands me better than I understand myself, because he's been living rent-free behind my eyes. That certainty is the biggest thing he owns. It's also the exact place to hide a knife, because a man never frisks the part of you he's sure he already controls. Wednesday had come out of her corner. I can build the lie, she said. I'm good at lies that hold their shape under pressure. I've been telling the school a calm one about my disposition for months. Him a false knight, a false weakness, a door he thinks he found that we left open on purpose, with everything behind it arranged to look like our worst fear and built underneath to be his. Her flat dark eyes had the gleam they got near a solvable thing. He's proud, proud as a hinge. You don't break a proud man, you let him break himself walking confidently through the gap you cut for him. You'll need months to build a deception that fine, Remus said quietly. We'll have weeks, Harry said. So we start tonight. We don't wait for him to be ready. We get ready first, and we decide what he finds when he gets here. And we make sure the thing he's been reading off me for 14 years tells him exactly the wrong story on exactly the right night. He looked around the room, at the general and the seer and the two old friends and the wolf, and the plan was only a seed yet, just an edge of one, but it was his, the first war plan in his life that no one had handed him already assembled. He's been in my head so long he stopped knocking. I'm going to use the door he forgot was a door. Dumbledore looked at Harry for a long moment, and what crossed his face was not the pride of a man admiring his weapon. It was the harder, gladder thing, a teacher outpaced by a student and choosing to be glad of it. Yes, he said softly, I rather think you are. Council broke after that into the smaller business of where everyone would sleep and who would carry which message, and Harry found himself in the shuffle, pulled aside by Sirius into the corridor outside, where the candlelight was low and the stone held the day's cold. I had a whole speech, Sirius said. On the road, I rehearsed it. It was about how you don't have to be brave, how I'd take you somewhere even Dumbledore couldn't find, an island. I had an island picked out. He scrubbed a hand over his face. And then I got here and watched you talk Albus Dumbledore into being a better man at a fence in the cold, with a werewolf standing guard over you like you were the last good thing in the world, and I realized the speech was for a kid who doesn't live here anymore. His eyes were bright. When did that happen? When did you get so? A girl handed me a floor, Harry said. I keep saying it. It keeps being the answer. Yeah, Sirius huffed a laugh about the girl. He glanced down the corridor where Enid had appeared in the doorway and was very obviously pretending not to wait for Harry while vibrating with the effort of pretending. I sent the scarf, by the way, blue, it's in my bag. I was going to be cool about giving it to her, and instead I think I'm going to cry on her, which she should know is the higher honor. He gripped Harry's shoulder hard, as he had at the gate on the first day, a man with nobody to practice on practicing anyway. I spent 12 years in a place where nobody was coming. You spent 15 years in a house where nobody wanted you. Look at us. Look at where we ended up. At a school for monsters, about to fight a dark lord, and I have never in my life been so happy, because for the first time it's a fight we're in together instead of a thing being done to you. He pulled Harry into one more rough embrace. Introduce me to your wolf, Harry. I've got a scarf to ruin with my face. They ended the day on the roof, the way the important days ended, all of them this time. Enid had wept on Sirius as predicted, and Sirius had wept back, and the blue scarf had been wound around her neck with great ceremony, and was not, Harry suspected, ever coming off. Remus and Dumbledore had walked the perimeter together in the dark, two old friends mending something in the quiet that needed no audience. Wednesday had appropriated the star-stitched blanket and was lying on her back charting the constellations against, she said, a calendar of her own devising that predicted nothing good and predicted it precisely. Yoko had brought from somewhere a flask of cocoa large enough to be a tactical asset. Bianca came up through the window too, which surprised no one more than Bianca, and she stood at the edge of the roof with her arms crossed against the cold and looked at the assembled oddness of them, the wolf and the wizard and the seer and the vampire and the two old wizards walking the wall below, and she said to the knight in general, I run the most exclusive club at this school, and somehow the actual interesting people are sitting on a roof drinking cocoa with the new kid. She accepted a mug from Yoko without quite admitting she'd wanted one. If there's going to be a war, I'm not hearing about it secondhand. The nightshades hold the water and half the upper school owes me a favor. Whatever you're building, build me into it. She took a sip and added with the studied carelessness of someone giving away that she'd decided to care. Also, the scarf suits her. Don't tell her I said so. I have a reputation. And Harry sat at the edge of it all with Enid tucked against his side, the blue scarf bright at her throat, and he looked at the ridge where the patient light still burned, no longer a mystery, a promise of the thing that was coming, and he found he could look at it without the old vertigo. There's a piece of him in me, he said low just to her under the talk in the cold. I keep waiting to feel disgusting about it. I think I'm supposed to. You're not disgusting. Enid said it instantly, flatly, a fact she would not be debating. You're a haunted house with the best tenant in the world about to evict the ghost. There's a difference, and I will say it as many times as it takes. She turned her face up to him, and the gold was soft now, banked low home. Can I tell you the thing I figured out listening to that old man, the thing he was too polite to say plain? Always. He said your soul had room for a bad thing because the world hollowed you out. Which means the bad thing isn't really the enemy. The hollow is. The bad thing's just a squatter who found an empty house. Her hand found his, marked palm to marked palm, the crescents flaring warm. So I'm not fighting the ghost, I'm fixing the house. Every morning in the hallway, every blue nail, every dumb scrapbook page. Every single thing that fills you up an inch more is me taking back another room from the dark, and I have been doing it for weeks without even knowing the stakes, and now that I know the stakes, I'm going to be unbearable about it. You think I was a lot before. You have not seen a werewolf with a mission. She pressed her forehead to his shoulder. He's coming for the piece of himself in you. And he's going to get here and find there's no peace left, because I'll have filled every inch of you so full of being wanted that there's nowhere for him to live. That's the plan. That's my whole entire plan. Love you out loud until the dark runs out of room. Out on the ridge the patient light burned, and somewhere across an ocean an old man began packing for a hunt, and a dark thing in pieces gathered itself for a night it had not yet chosen. And on the roof of Ophelia Hall a boy who had never been chosen first sat in the cold with a wolf's head on his shoulder and a blue scarf glowing between them, and let himself, against every law he'd ever lived by, believe her. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. Teeth the weeks Dumbledore had promised them turned out to be a gift Harry had never been given before, which was time to get ready for the thing that was coming instead of being ambushed by it. They used every hour. Dumbledore went, with a grim embrace at the gate and a promise to write in a cipher only Wednesday could read, and the order moved into the wide, dangerous world to begin pulling the enemy who hunted Harry apart a hidden piece at a time. Sirius and Remus took a warded cottage at the edge of Jericho, close enough to reach in a crisis, far enough that no watcher could draw a line from them to Harry, and Sirius wrote nearly every day, mostly nonsense, occasionally not, and Harry wrote back, and the column in his private ledger that had always stayed empty filled up with letters from people who simply wanted to know how his day had gone. The school changed shape around the secret. Weems trained them herself in the evenings, the core of them in a cleared hall with the windows blacked. Harry and his magic, Enid and the wolf she was still coaxing all the way out, Wednesday and the cold architecture of her plans, Yoko and her vampire speed, Bianca and a voice that could stop a person's heart for the length of a held note, and Xavier, who turned out to be able to pull living things out of charcoal and set them loose, which was either art or weaponry depending on how frightened you were. They learned to move as a unit, they learned each other's gaps. And Harry learned the hardest discipline of all, the one Dumbledore had warned would cost him, which was to take a lie and believe it so completely with the splinter listening that it would pass for truth all the way to the far end of the line. He practiced it in the dead tower, alone, by feel. He would pick a false thing, a fear that wasn't real, a weakness he didn't have, and he would build it in himself until he could not tell it from the truth, and then with the scar warm he would let it leak. It made him sick the first dozen times, the deliberate self-deception, the sense of his own mind becoming a stage with a hostile audience, but he got better. By the third week he could hold a lie steady for an hour. By the fourth he could feel, faint and far off, the splinter take the bait and savor it, and he learned to feel nothing about being savored, which was its own grim education. "You're sure he's reading it?" Wednesday asked him once in the tower, while a false despair Harry had spent 40 minutes manufacturing still hung sour at the back of his mind. "He's reading it. I can feel him enjoying it." Harry let the false thing dissolve, and the relief of his own real mind coming back was a clean, cold thing. "He thinks I'm cracking, he thinks the school's a comfort I've gone soft inside. He thinks the wolf is a liability that's making me sentimental and slow." Harry looked out the window at the ridge, "which is exactly what I've been feeding him. The night he comes, he's going to come expecting to find a frightened boy hiding behind a girl. Let him." What he did not feed the splinter, what he kept locked in the one room of himself he'd learned to seal so tight even he couldn't hear it think, was the truth, that the wolf was not making him soft. The wolf was making him into something Tom Riddle had never once in his long, cold life possessed and could not imagine and would not see coming until it had its teeth in him. The lure came on a gray afternoon in the 5th week, and it came, as these things do, through the one of them nobody was guarding. Eugene Ottinger was 14 and small and kept bees on the roof of the science building, and he was the gentlest creature at a school full of monsters, and he had a crush on the town and an unwise habit of slipping down to Jericho to buy the good honey jars the hardware store stocked. He went down after lunch and did not come back, and at 4 o'clock a crow that was not a crow rapped at the window of the dining hall and dropped a single object on the sill and flew apart into smoke. It was a beekeeper's glove, Eugene's, and pinned inside it, written in a hand too elegant to be anything but a threat, a note: the weather vane, sundown, bring the Potter boy and the rest may keep their pet beekeeper. Come without him and we feed the bees to the bees. The hall went loud with fear, and Harry let it for exactly as long as it took him to read the note twice and feel the shape of the thing underneath it. It's a trap, he said, and the loudness fell off a cliff. Obviously. They can't get through the wards, so they need me outside them, and they've worked out the one lever that gets me there. They took the kindest person at this school and dared us to leave him to die. That's not clumsy, that's somebody who studied us. He set the glove down, which means we don't get to be clumsy back. We're not leaving Eugene, Enid said, the gold already up, and 3 other voices said the same thing on top of hers. No, Harry agreed, we're not. That's the part they're counting on, and they're right to count on it because they're correct that we won't leave him, and the only way to win against someone who's read you correctly is to be exactly what they expect right up until the second you aren't. He looked around at them, and Weems had come into the doorway and was listening with her arms folded and her pale eyes sharp, letting him run it, the way she'd been letting him run things since the gate. So here's what they think happens. The frightened Potter boy, soft from a winter of being loved, comes down to the weather vane at sundown because he can't bear to let a child die. He brings his friends because he's sentimental. They spring the trap, they take me, the beacon in my head lights up the second I'm outside the wards, and their master gets the piece of himself he's been starving for, delivered, gift-wrapped by my own decency. He paused. I've spent 5 weeks feeding the thing in my scar that exact story. It's been savoring it for a month. Tonight I'm going to walk into that cafe believing it harder than I've ever believed anything, so that he's watching through me and seeing precisely the victory he ordered. And underneath, Wednesday said, the gleam coming up in her, the real plan. Underneath, Harry said, we've already won because they picked the ground and the time and told us both. Sundown at the weather vane. They've handed us the where and the when of an ambush and assumed we're too frightened to do anything with the gift except show up and blade. He turned to Weems. I need to leave the wards, I know what it costs, but I need you to trust that the cost is the point, that I want him watching tonight, because a man who's certain he's winning stops checking his footing. He turned to the others. And I need all of you, and I need you early, because we are going to get to that cafe before sundown, and we are going to be the ones who set the trap, and when his people walk in expecting frightened children, they're going to find a cafe that belongs to us. Weems was quiet for a moment. Then she crossed to the blacked-out window and looked at nothing and said, Marilyn Thornhill will report you all absent with a stomach complaint. The town has a quiet exit through the old chapel cellar that the wards count as inside until you reach the river, which buys you a half-mile before the beacon lights. And Mr. Black, she turned, I have watched a great many clever children believe they had a plan. The ones who lived were the ones who had also planned to be wrong. What is your plan to be wrong? Sirius and Remus, Harry said. They're already in town, they don't come to the cafe. They sit on the bridge, out of sight, and if everything I've built falls apart, they're the thing the enemy didn't plan for either. A second trap behind the first. He met her eyes. I planned to be wrong. I've spent my whole life being the thing somebody didn't plan for. I learned it from the best. Something moved in Weems' face that on a warmer person would have been a smile. Go, she said. Bring me back my beekeeper and Miss Sinclair. She looked at Enid, and her voice gentled by a single degree. Tonight may ask you for the thing you've been afraid won't come. If it comes, do not fight it. Let it out. It has been waiting your whole life for a reason, and I suspect the reason is standing next to you. They went down through the chapel cellar in the failing light, 6 of them in a plan, and the cold river smell came up to meet them, and then they were across and out, and the moment Harry's boot touched the far bank he felt the beacon light. It was a physical thing, the scar going hot, the sense of a vast cold attention turning toward him from very far away, fixing, settling, satisfied. He held the false story up in front of it like a lantern. I'm afraid I shouldn't have come. I can't let Eugene die. I'm walking into this because I'm weak and good, and there's nothing else I know how to be. He believed it with everything he had. Far away, the splinter drank it down and was glad, and Harry felt the gladness and kept walking and let nothing real show in the lit room of his mind. He's watching, he murmured to Enid, who walked at his shoulder with the blue scarf wound tight and her hands loose and ready. Right now, through me. Then give me a job, she said low. If he's looking through your eyes, give him something to look at that sells it. Hold my hand, Harry said, like you're scared, like I'm the only thing keeping you upright. She took his hand and made herself tremble, this girl who did not tremble, and leaned into him as they walked the dark road into Jericho, and to anyone watching, to the thing watching through Harry's own eyes, they were exactly what the note had ordered up. A frightened boy and his clinging wolf, walking soft and doomed toward a cafe full of killers. Underneath, where the splinter could not reach, her grip was a column of iron and her pulse was slow and her whole body was a coiled in patient readiness, and the trembling was the best lie either of them told all night. The weather vane sat at the end of Main Street with its windows warm and gold, and from the outside it looked like every safe place Harry had never been allowed to have, and inside it, waiting, were men who had come a very long way to take him apart. His friends had gotten there 40 minutes early by a different road, slipping in as a vampire who needed no door and a girl who could walk out of a charcoal sketch, and a siren the staff were charmed to forget, and a seer nobody ever remembered arriving. The cafe did not belong to the men inside it anymore. It belonged to the 6 of them. The men just didn't know it yet. The bell over the door rang as Harry pushed it open, ordinary and cheerful, and the warmth of the cafe closed around him, and there were 4 of them. They had taken the booths along the back, and they wore the town like a costume, flannel and denim over the wrong kind of stillness, and the cafe's actual customers had been moved to the floor behind the counter, bound and silent and breathing alive, which Harry noted and filed because it meant the men had been told to keep witnesses for leverage rather than tidiness. Eugene was at the center table, small and white-faced and unhurt, with a wand at the back of his neck held by a woman whose smile had been practiced in a mirror until it stopped meaning anything. "There he is," the woman said. Her voice was pleasant. "That was the worst kind. The famous boy you came, he said you would. He's so rarely wrong about the soft ones." She did not get up. "Sit down, Harry Potter. Hands where the room can see them. Tell the wolf to heal. We've a portkey that leaves in 4 minutes, and you're going to be holding it when it does, and if you're very good and very quick, the beekeeper and these nice townsfolk get to wake up tomorrow." Harry let his face do the frightened thing, because the splinter was watching and the splinter needed to see it. He let his hand tremble in Enid's. He let himself look, for all the world, like a boy who had walked into a trap and only now understood the teeth of it. And then he counted the room as he had counted every room of his life, and he found his friends in it. Yoko was the shadow behind the coat rack that had no business being a shadow. Bianca was the customer in the corner booth the men had overlooked because Bianca had wanted to be overlooked, humming something just below hearing that had already slowed 2 of the 4 men's pulses without their noticing. Xavier's hand rested on the cafe's chalkboard menu, and the charcoal sketch of a daily special had grown, very quietly, an extra set of legs, and Wednesday was nowhere, which meant Wednesday was exactly where she meant to be. "Okay," Harry said and let his voice shake. "Okay, don't hurt him, I'll come. Just let me say goodbye to her, please, just let me say goodbye." The woman's practiced smile widened a fraction, because mercy was a thing she enjoyed denying and Harry had just handed her the chance. "How sweet," she said. "No. That's fine," Harry said in an entirely different voice, the cold, clean one, and let the false story drop all at once like a curtain and reached through the scar and shoved. He had spent 5 weeks feeding the splinter certainty. Now he fed it in a single concentrated burst, the truth, all of it, the whole real plan blazing up at once where the watching thing could not help but see it. "I am not afraid. I was never afraid. This is my cafe." Looked down, and across an ocean a cold mind flinched at the sudden reversal, and for one priceless second the woman saw her master's confidence stutter behind her own eyes and hesitated. 1 second was all the room needed. Bianca's hum became a single pure rising note, and the 2 men nearest her dropped where they sat, conscious and frozen, their own heartbeats turned against them. Yoko crossed the cafe faster than the eye could keep, and the wand at Eugene's neck was simply gone, and so was the woman's grip on it. Xavier's charcoal beast peeled off the chalkboard in a roar of black dust and put itself between the 4th man and the door. And Harry, who had practiced this in a tower until it was as easy as breathing, threw out one hand and lifted every loose object in the weather vane into the air at once, the cups and the chairs and the sugar jars and the napkin dispensers, a whole cafe's worth of the ordinary, and held it there, trembling, a held breath of cutlery, and the 4 killers who had come for a frightened child found themselves in a room where the very furniture had taken a side. "Eugene," Harry said, to Enid, "now." The boy bolted. Enid caught him and spun him behind her in one motion, and that should have been the end of it, the clean win, the plan working exactly as built. But the woman with the practiced smile was a professional, and professionals do not freeze for more than a second, and as she came up out of the booth her wand was already moving, and Harry was looking at Eugene, and the curse that left her wand was not aimed at Harry at all. It was aimed low and fast and green at the small white-faced boy who had only ever wanted to buy honey, and Enid was in front of him, and there was no time for Harry's floating cutlery, no time for Yoko's speed, no time for anything at all except the green light closing the last yard toward a 14-year-old's back. And the wolf came out. It came out of Enid all at once, the way 3 years of waiting comes out, the way a held note finally breaks, and there was no slow theatrical change, no movie shimmer, only a sound Harry felt in his teeth, and then a wall of fur and muscle and fury where the girl had been, vast and golden-eyed and impossibly fast, and the curse that would have killed Eugene struck the wolf's shoulder instead and burst against a hide the green light could not find purchase on, scattering harmless as thrown water. Because the magic that built that curse had been made to murder a frightened child and had not been made for this, for a mate-bonded wolf at the full height of 3 years of denied becoming, standing over the things she loved with her teeth bared at the dark. The weather vane went silent, the floating cutlery hung trembling in the air. And the woman with the practiced smile looked up and up at the creature that had been a girl in a blue scarf 1 second before, and her practiced face came apart at last into the thing underneath, which was terror. "Now you've done it," Harry said quietly into the silence and let the cutlery fall. What followed was over in under a minute, and Harry made sure afterward that everyone understood it had been a rout and not a slaughter, because the difference mattered, and because Enid would need to know it when she was a girl again. The wolf did not tear, she herded. She was a golden mountain moving at impossible speed through a cafe too small to hold her, and she put herself between the dark and every person in the room who mattered, and she used her size the way a sheepdog uses its body, a wall here, a feint there, driving the 4 killers into the corner Xavier's charcoal beast had sealed, and she snarled at them with a sound that loosened the will in their knees, and she did not close her jaws on a single one because Harry had asked her not to weeks ago. In the dead tower, when they were planning for a night exactly like this, "We win clean," he'd said, "we're not them." And the wolf, who was Enid all the way down, remembered. One man tried for the door, Yoko was faster. One man tried for his portkey, a tarnished spoon already glowing in his fist, and Harry took the spoon out of his hand with a flick of will and hung it spinning in the air out of reach. One man simply sat down in the wreckage of a booth and put his hands on his head, which was the smartest thing any of them did all night. And the woman with the no longer practiced smile turned and ran for the kitchen and the back door low and fast, abandoning her people, which told Harry everything about the kind of master she served. She made it through the back door and onto the bridge, and there in the dark, 2 figures were waiting who had not been part of any plan she'd been briefed on. "Evening," said Sirius Black pleasantly, and stunned her off her feet before she'd finished her first stride, and Remus caught the limp weight of her and lowered it to the boards with the careful courtesy of a man who had spent his life refusing to be cruel even to people who'd earned it. "You all right in there?" Sirius called toward the cafe, his voice tight under the lightness. "Tell me you're all right, or I'm coming in, plan or no plan." "We're all right," Harry called back, and the cafe answered him. His friends, his ridiculous brave friends, a vampire and a siren and an artist and a beekeeper and a seer who had appeared in the doorway with a length of enchanted cord already knotted into restraints. Because Wednesday had spent the fight, it turned out, quietly disabling the men's wands one by one from the shadows, which was why not one of their curses after the first had found its mark. 3 secured inside, 1 on the bridge, 1 beekeeper recovered, no friendly casualties, Wednesday reported, in the flat tone of a person reading a grocery list, binding the one who'd put his hands on his head. "I had us at a 60% chance of this going considerably worse. The variable I underweighted was the wolf." She looked up at the golden creature still standing guard over Eugene with her hackles slowly coming down. "I'll adjust my models." The wolf turned her great head and looked at Harry across the wrecked warm room, and her eyes were gold and ancient and entirely, unmistakably Enid. And Harry crossed to her through the floating, settling dust and put his marked hand flat against the fur of her enormous shoulder, where the killing curse had struck and scattered and left nothing, and felt the bond flare warm under his palm, and felt her huge frame begin slowly to tremble, not with fear. With the aftermath of 3 years of waiting arriving all at once. "Hey," he said softly just to her. "Hey, you did it. Eugene's safe. Everybody's safe. You can come back now. I've got you. Come back." And the wolf folded down around him, vast and warm, and pressed her head against his chest hard enough to move him a step, and held there breathing, while the change came over her the slow way this time, the gentle way, the girl rising back up through the wolf like the sun coming up, until it was Enid kneeling on the cafe floor in the blue scarf and not much dignity, shaking, laughing, crying alive, her arms locked around him and her face in his collar. "I shifted," she said, muffled, wrecked, delighted. Harry, I shifted after 3 years. I finally, the second she went for Eugene, it just came, it just knew it was the easiest thing I've ever done. I don't know why I ever thought it was hard." She pulled back to look at him, her face a disaster of tears and joy, the gold ebbing out of her eyes back to ordinary blue. "You felt it, through the bond, tell me you felt it." "I felt all of it," Harry said. His voice wasn't steady and he didn't try to make it. "You were magnificent. You caught a killing curse on your shoulder for a kid you barely know, and you didn't bite a single one of them because I asked you not to a month ago and you remembered. Enid, you remembered in the middle of that." He held her face in both hands, the marked one warm against her cheek. "There's nothing soft about you. There never was. He thinks the wolf made me weak. He's got it exactly backwards, and tonight he watched it happen through my own eyes, and he still doesn't understand what he saw." Behind them, Sirius came in off the bridge with the unconscious woman over his shoulder, and stopped in the doorway, and took in the scene. The bound men and the freed townsfolk and the floating spoon still spinning lazily in the air, and the godson he wanted to be ordinary kneeling on a cafe floor holding a werewolf who just saved a room full of people, and something complicated went over his face. "So," he said, a little hoarse. The blue scarf girl is a 140-pound apex predator. I'm going to need that mentioned in the next letter. I had to find out in person. That's not how you do a reveal, Harry. There's an etiquette. They brought the captives back through the chapel cellar under guard, and Weems was waiting, and she did not thank anyone because thanks were for after, and instead she had the bound men sorted and sealed and awarded Undercroft, the school kept for exactly the emergencies it pretended never to have. The woman with the ruined smile they questioned alone in a stone room, and they did it the way Harry had insisted on the walk back, which was not the way her master would have done it. No pain, no threats they had to mean. Just the truth potion Weems kept in a locked cabinet and administered by the drop, and a circle of patient faces, and the slow, careful unspooling of a frightened servant who had been promised glory and delivered, instead, to a school full of monsters with a werewolf breathing in the next room. She told them more than she knew she was telling. That was the thing about the truth potion. It loosened not just the answers, but the shape of the questions her master had never let her ask. He was coming, that much they'd known, but she gave them the rest, that the assault on Nevermore was set for the night of the new moon, 19 days off, chosen because the dark of the moon was when the old wards thinned at their roots and the school's own defenders would be at their lowest ebb. That he would come in force, the full muster of his people, and that he would not come alone, that he had spent the winter making more of the wet gray scouts and worse things besides, an army of the patient dead to throw at the walls until the living defenders tired. And that he had a way through the wards, or believed he did, a key he had been quietly cutting, though she did not know its shape, only that he spoke of it the way a man speaks of a thing already in his pocket. And Harry, Weems said, very evenly. What are his orders regarding Mr. Black? The woman's loosened eyes drifted to Harry, and what came out of her then made the stone room cold. Alive, she said. He wants the Potter boy alive until the peace comes home, but the wolf, her gaze slid to the door to where Enid stood with her arms crossed and her jaw tight. He saw the wolf tonight, through his own eyes, he said. He was so angry. He'd thought she was a weakness, and tonight he saw she's the thing eating his hold on his own splinter, and now, the potion pulled it out of her flat and final. Now the first order, before the walls, before the wizard, before anything, is the wolf. Kill the wolf, he said. Kill her in front of him if you can. A bond cut bleeds both ways. Empty the house out again, and the splinter comes home on its own, and the wizard comes after it, and the rest is simply tidying. The room was silent. Harry felt Enid go still beside him, and he felt her down the bond too, the cold drop of a girl hearing plainly that the enemy of the world had assigned her death a priority above his own capture. And then he felt her decide not to be afraid of it, felt the cold drop turn over and come up as something with a spine, and she uncrossed her arms and said into the quiet in a voice that was almost light, top of the list. That's actually kind of flattering. I've never been anyone's biggest problem before. Enid, Sirius said gently. No, I mean it. She looked around the room at all of them, and the gold flickered low and steady in her eyes. 5 weeks ago I was the wolf who couldn't wolf, and tonight the scariest man alive looked through a magic scar and decided I'm the single biggest threat to his immortality, and he's right. He's completely right. I am. Her hand found Harry's, the crescents warming. He wants to empty the house. I'm the one who's been filling it, so of course I'm first on the list. That's not a threat, that's a performance review, and I'm getting a glowing one. But under the brightness, her grip on Harry's hand was iron, and she did not let go, and the lightness was the bravest lie she'd told all night, braver even than the trembling on the road. Weems studied the two of them for a long moment, the wolf and the wizard, marked palm to marked palm. He has told us the night, she said at last. 19 days. He has told us his shape, his army, and his first target. The woman believes she has been an obedient servant. In truth, she has handed us the entire architecture of his attack, because a man who is certain he cannot lose grows careless about what his servants are permitted to know. She turned to Harry, and the general was fully in her now. You wanted him careless. You have spent 5 weeks teaching that splinter to think you soft, and tonight you let it watch you win, which I confess I did not understand until this moment. You wanted him to see the wolf. You wanted him angry and certain and aimed at the wrong target. I wanted him to commit to a plan I could see the whole of, Harry said quietly, killing Enid first. It's the worst thing he could try, and it's exactly what he's going to do, and now we have 19 days to make her the most dangerous thing to attack on the entire field. He looked at Enid, and there was no lightness in him at all. He thinks cutting the bond will empty me out. He's right that it would. So we're going to make sure he can't cut it, and we're going to let him spend his whole assault trying, while everything that actually beats him happens somewhere he isn't looking. You used me as bait, Enid said, not an accusation, a realization turning it over. I used the truth as bait, Harry said. You being the most important person on the field isn't a trick, Enid, it's just true. He looked through my eyes and saw the one thing I can't hide even from myself, which is that you're the center of everything now. I can't make him stop believing that because it's real. His thumb moved over the crescent on her hand. So instead I'm going to make him bet his entire war on getting to you, and then I'm going to make sure he can't. That's the plan. The whole plan is built on you being exactly as irreplaceable as he thinks you are, and exactly as unkillable as I'm going to spend 19 days making you. Enid looked at him, and whatever she saw in his face made her eyes go bright again, the undignified shining she never bothered to hide. "Okay, but real quick," she said. "Did you just say I'm the center of everything in front of your godfather and the headmistress and Wednesday, who is writing it down?" "I'm writing it down," Wednesday confirmed. "Because if so, I'm going to need that for the scrapbook. That's a whole page, that's a centerfold." They told the school the next morning, because Weems had decided the time for managing the quiet was over. She stood up at the gathering in the quad where it had all begun, and she told 200 outcasts the truth, that a dark thing was coming on a counted night with an army, that it had already reached into their town and taken one of their own and been driven off, and that Nevermore had stood for 3 centuries because it had never once been only a building and would not be only a building now. She did not promise them safety. She offered them instead the chance to be the thing the dark did not plan for, and Harry, standing at the front with Enid's hand in his and the crescent bright on his skin, watched the strange, brave faces of a school full of the unwanted decide, one by one, to stay and fight for the place that had taken them in. Bianca stood up before Weems had finished and said the nightshades held the water and the high ground and would hold them on the night, and dared anyone to argue, and no one did. Xavier said he could fill the grounds with things that hurt only what they were told to hurt, and would. A trio of vampires offered the dark, which was theirs to give. Even Ajax, snakes flat with nerves, stood and said that Gorgons turned the wrong things to stone and he'd learn to aim it by the new moon if it killed him. And Enid told him, kindly and in front of everyone, that she'd always known he was braver than he was quick, and the snakes turned a grateful shade of green. One by one the school enlisted itself, not because anyone ordered it, but because the unwanted, when they finally find a place that wants them, will set themselves on fire to keep it warm. Eugene found Harry afterwards, small and earnest, with a jar of the good honey he'd never got to buy, having apparently sourced it from somewhere in the intervening chaos. "I wasn't scared," he said, which was a lie and a brave one, and Harry let him have it. "Well, I was a little scared." But Enid came through the wall like the wall was a suggestion. His eyes were huge. "Is it true she's top of the dark guys list now, because of you?" "It's true," Harry said. "That's the most romantic thing I've ever heard." Eugene breathed and pressed the honey into Harry's hands and fled. And Harry stood holding a jar of honey in the cold, bright morning and understood that the story had already gotten away from all of them, that it was the school's now, the wolf and the wizard and the Dark Lord's list, and that there were worse things for a hunted boy to be than the center of a story a whole school had decided to believe in. They spent the days that followed turning a promise into a forge. Harry had said he would make Enid the most dangerous thing on the field and the hardest to kill, and it turned out that was not a thing you did to a person but a thing you built with them. They trained in the Blacktout Hall and the Dead Tower and the Cold Woods, and the work split itself into halves that fit together like hands. Enid learned the wolf the way you learn a new instrument you've owned your whole life and never opened the case for, and she was a prodigy at it, all that denied becoming, pouring out into speed and control and a frightening grace, and Wednesday timed her and charted her and pronounced her eventually statistically inconvenient to murder, which Enid had embroidered onto a patch by the end of the week. The other half was the bond. They drilled the channel until it was a reflex, until Harry could pour the firm floor of his magic into her, and she could pour the wolf's bottomless steadiness back, until the two of them fighting apart were each stronger than they had any right to be, and the two of them fighting together were something the field had never seen. Harry built her defenses the way he'd once built his own walls, layer on patient layer, charms worked into the blue scarf, a ward that answered to the crescent on his hand, a dozen small redundancies so that any one of them failing left 6 more between her and the dark. He did not tell her how much of his sleep went into it. She knew anyway, she always knew. She found him in the tower past midnight 3 nights running and simply sat with him while he worked, holding the candle until he'd remember she was there and let himself stop. "You can't ward me into living forever," she said, one of those nights, gently, watching him knot another protection into the scarf with hands gone clumsy from too many hours. "You know that, right? At some point you have to trust that I'm good at this. That I'm allowed to be the one standing in front sometimes instead of always being the thing you stand in front of. He put you first on a list," Harry said, not looking up. "Before me, before the walls, I can't." The knot slipped. He started it again. "Everyone who's ever stood in front of me died doing it. My parents, nearly Sirius twice. I've got a whole graveyard of people who decided I was worth standing in front of, and I'm not adding you to it, Enid, I'm not. I'll ward you until my hands fall off first." Enid was quiet. Then she set the candle down and took his ruined, clumsy hands in both of hers and waited until he looked at her. "Okay, then we make a deal." Her eyes were steady, the gold low and warm. "You ward me with everything you've got because that's how you love. I get it. I'd never take it from you. And I shift and I fight and I stand where I'm strongest because that's how I love, and you don't get to take that from me either. We both love loud and we both love stubborn, and neither of us gets to wrap the other one in a box marked fragile. Deal?" She pressed his hands flat between hers, the crescents flaring. Nobody's standing in front. We stand together, side by side, so close he can't get a curse between us. That's the only formation I'll accept. That's the centerfold. A grin tugged at her. Now finish the scarf, because it's gorgeous and I'm wearing it to the apocalypse, and then come to bed, you disaster. You've been awake for 3 days warding a werewolf who came back from the dead this afternoon. He finished the scarf. He came down from the tower. And the deal they made that night, side by side and no one in front, became the thing the whole plan was built on, the formation the dark would break itself against. 12 days out, on a night that should have been ordinary, they went up on the roof, the two of them, with the cocoa and the loud blanket and the blue scarf, and below them Jericho glittered in its bowl, and on the ridge the patient light still burned, and they both looked at it for a while without talking. 12 days, Enid said finally. 12. She leaned into him, warm as a hearth, and the crescents glowed between them. And out in the dark the enemy's light burned on its ridge, and somewhere an army of the patient dead waited for a moonless night, and Harry sat with all of it and found, against every law he had ever lived by, that he was not afraid, because the most dangerous creature on the field had her head on his shoulder and had decided out loud in front of witnesses, with a centerfold pending, that she was his. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. The siege plan. He did not wait for the new moon. That was the first thing they learned, and they learned it the hard way, which was the only way that man ever taught anything. 5 nights before the dark of the moon, while the school slept behind wards Weems had spent a fortnight thickening, the ridge light went out. Harry felt it before the alarm because the splinter felt it, a cold, eager stirring behind his scar that yanked him up out of sleep with the certainty already formed. He was at the window with his wand in his hand before he was fully awake, and the valley below was wrong, the dark moving in the tree line in a way dark did not move, a slow gray tide coming up out of the pines toward the walls, and he understood that the timeline the captive had given them had been a gift the captive's master had wanted them to have. A counted night to brace for, so that the real first blow would land 4 nights early on a school looking the wrong way. The bell rang then, Weems' bell, the one that meant the real thing, and Nevermore woke into the drill it had been rehearsing for weeks. It was not the full assault. Harry knew that within the first minute, running the cold, clean arithmetic even as he pulled his clothes on and sent the double note down the bond, "Come find me, come now." There were no Death Eaters in the tree line, no green light, no riddle. There was only the patient dead, a wave of the wet gray scouts and the worst things made from them, hundreds of them, more than the woman had let them imagine, climbing the slope toward the walls in a slow, tireless flood. A probe, a test. He's counting our defenses, Harry thought, dragging the truth up out of the cold. He's spending the dead to see how we spend the living. And he's doing it tonight off the script to catch us reacting instead of ready. Then we don't react, Harry said aloud to the empty room, and went to fight a flood with a plan. The walls of Nevermore held that first hour, because the school had decided to be more than a building. Bianca's nightshades held the high galleries and turned the dead back with sound that unstrung them where they climbed. Xavier's charcoal beasts roamed the grounds, tearing into the gray tide and dissolving and being drawn again. Yoko and her kind moved through the dark faster than the dead could turn, and Weems herself stood on the front steps in a shape that was not quite human and not quite anything, vast and terrible, and the dead that reached her did not reach past her. Harry worked the central court with Wednesday at his back calling targets, and he had never used his magic like this, not in defense of something, not with the floor of the bond firm under him and a whole school's worth of people he refused to lose, and the power came up out of him clean and enormous and exact, and the dead fell back from the court in heaps that did not rise. They were winning, that was the cruel part. For 1 hour they were winning, and Harry let himself believe the probe had been a miscalculation, that Riddle had spent his dead too cheaply, and somewhere across the dark the splinter felt him believe it and was glad, because believing it was exactly what Harry had been meant to do. The real strike was Enid. He felt it the instant before it happened, the bond going taut and then white, and he turned from the court toward the east wall where she had been holding the low gate as the wolf, magnificent and golden, and exactly as statistically inconvenient to murder as Wednesday had promised, and he saw in the torchlight what the flood had been hiding. Not all the dead were climbing. A dozen of them had gone still at the base of the east wall, arranged, waiting, and from the center of them a figure rose that was not dead at all, a living servant who had walked in under the cover of the tireless flood, robed and patient, with a length of something dark and barbed already uncoiling from his hand, and he had not come for the wall. He had come for the wolf at the gate, first on the list, before the walls, before the wizard, before anything. Enid. Harry's voice tore out of him, and he was already running, already throwing every protection he'd woven into the blue scarf up at once, and the wards he'd nodded answered and flared, and they were good, they were so good, and they were a half-second too slow. The barbed dark thing took her across the shoulder as she turned, and it was made of the same magic as the killing curse and worse, made to cut a bond at its root, and the wolf screamed, a sound Harry had no walls for, and went down. The world narrowed to a tunnel with the wolf at the end of it. Harry did not remember crossing the court. He remembered the servant turning toward him, unhurried, lifting the barbed weapon again for the second cut, the one that would finish what the first had started, finish Enid, cut the bond all the way through and empty Harry's soul out for the splinter to fill. He remembered the cold, clean part of him going somewhere else entirely, somewhere past planning, past the careful self-control he'd built in the tower, down to the floor of himself, and finding that the floor was not stone after all but a thing alive and golden and bound to him, and that it was hurt, and that the hurt had unlocked a door in him he had kept shut his whole life because he had always been told what was behind it was the thing he must never become. He opened the door. The magic that came out of him was not the exact careful power he'd practiced. It was older and it was wordless, and it did not float the cutlery. It threw the servant off Enid and into the east wall hard enough that the stone remembered it, and it threw the dozen waiting dead away from her like leaves off a step, and it stood Harry over the fallen wolf with his wand forgotten in his hand and his eyes, Wednesday told him after, gone entirely the color of the bond, gold at the rim, and the surviving dead in the whole east quarter turned and fled from him, which the dead were not supposed to be able to do, because the dead do not feel fear. And felt it anyway, and then the white in the bond guttered, and Harry forgot the servant and the dead and the war, and dropped to his knees in the wreckage and gathered the wolf against him. She was changing back. Not as she had in the cafe, the sun coming up. This was the change of a body too hurt to hold its shape, the wolf slipping away because Enid underneath could not spare the strength to keep it, and she came back small and human and wrong-colored in his arms with the barbed wound black across her shoulder and the blue scarf soaked dark, and her eyes when they found his were already going far away. "Hey," Harry said. His voice did not work. He made it work. "Hey, no, look at me, stay. You don't get to do this. We had a deal, side by side, nobody in front. You broke the formation. Got him off the gate, though," Enid said. Her voice was a thread. She was trying to grin, and it wasn't working, and she did it anyway. "Did you see? I got him off the," and then the bond, the warm, steady floor that had held Harry up for 2 months, the channel he had learned to pour himself through and receive her through, the thing that filled the house and starved the dark, went thin as a held breath and flickered, and for one endless second Harry could not feel her on the other end of it at all. He had been afraid before. He had stood in graveyards and behind locked doors and at the wrong end of prophecies. He had never felt anything like the second the bond went quiet, because it was not fear. Fear was a thing that happened to a self, and in that second he understood that he was not entirely sure there would be a self left to be afraid, that some enormous part of what he now was lived on the other end of that channel, and the channel was going out. "No," Harry said to the universe, to the dark, to the splinter that stirred eager behind his scar at the vacancy opening up. "No, you don't get the house. Not 1 inch of it. She paid for that house." And he did the thing they had drilled in the tower, the sending, except he did not send a color or a word or a struck glass note. He sent everything. He took the locked room at the center of himself, the one he'd sealed so tight even the splinter couldn't hear it, the room where he kept the truth he never let himself feel because feeling it had always been too dangerous, the simple, unbearable fact that he loved her, that being chosen by her had remade him, that she was not a weakness or a strategy or a centerfold but the floor of the world. And he tore the door off that room and poured all of it down the failing channel at once. "Here, take it. Take all of it. There's no vacancy. The house is full. Come home." For a moment nothing, and then faint from very far down the thinning wire the wolf's wordless answer came back, weak and golden and absolutely Enid, and the channel caught and held and warmed, and Enid's eyes came back from wherever they'd been going and found his face and focused. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay, wow, you really mean it." A laugh, barely there, wet and astonished. "You couldn't have just said it on the roof like a normal." "Shut up," Harry said, holding her, rocking her, alive in his arms. Shut up, you're not allowed to almost die in the same minute I finally, Yoko." "Why okay, oh, I need her, I need the infirmary, I need." And they were already there, his friends, the vampire and the seer and the siren, lifting the weight of her out of his arms with 100 years of careful speed, and Harry knelt in the wreckage of the east wall with her blood on his hands and the bond warm and thin and holding, just holding, and let them carry her, because the one thing he could not do, the thing he had to do anyway, was let go. The probe broke off an hour before dawn, the gray tide draining back into the pines as if a hand had recalled it, which it had, and the school counted its cost in the gray light and found, against all odds, that it had no dead of its own. Wounded, yes. Frightened, yes. A breached east wall and a courtyard that would never look the same. But the unwanted had held the place that wanted them, and they had held it whole, and Weems walked the galleries at dawn telling them so, one exhausted brave face at a time. Enid was the cost, Enid, and the thing they all understood now that they had not understood before, which was exactly how the enemy meant to win. She lay in the infirmary under the school's old healer's care, and she would live, they said, because the cut had not gone all the way through, because something had poured into the wound at the last second and held the bond together by main force when it should have parted. She was pale in a way Harry had no file for, the color gone out of even her hair somehow, and she slept most of 2 days, and Harry did not leave. He sat by the cot with her hand in his, and the crescents kept their low warmth between them, the proof every minute that the channel still ran, and he worked from that chair because Weems brought the war to him rather than ask him to leave the chair, and he was grateful to her for it in a way he would never find words for. On the second evening, Enid woke all the way up and looked at him and said, "You look terrible," and Harry put his face down on the edge of the cot and shook once silently, and she got her weak hand into his hair and held it there. "I felt it go out," he said, into the blanket. "The bond. For a second I couldn't feel you. I didn't know there was that much of me on your end until it almost," he couldn't finish it. "I can't do that again. I can't be in a world where that channel goes quiet, Enid. I'm not built for it. I built myself wrong. I put too much of me over there." "Good," Enid whispered, fierce, even flat on her back, even gray. "That's the whole point. That's where it's supposed to live. You spent 15 years keeping all of you locked up in a house with no visitors because every time you let somebody in they got taken. So you put the most of you somewhere safe for once, with me." In the loud house with the werewolf and the deadbolt and the blue door, her fingers tightened weakly in his hair, and he tried to break in and rob the place, and he failed because you came home and filled it up so fast there was nowhere for the dark to stand. You hear me? He tried to empty you out and you got fuller. That's not a weakness he found. That's a wall he ran into, a ghost of the old grin. Also, you finally told me you love me, through a magic soul channel, during a battle. While I was bleeding out, I wanted on the record that you have the worst timing of any romantic lead in history, and I'm keeping you anyway. "I'll say it on the roof," Harry said, muffled, wrecked, almost laughing. "Properly, when you can climb the roof. You'd better. I want the cocoa and the moon and the whole production." She let her eyes drift closed, but her hand stayed in his hair. "Now tell me the bad news. You've got bad news face. I can read it even concussed." He told her because she'd earned the truth more than anyone, and because not telling her was the kind of protecting they'd already agreed neither of them got to do. The bad news had two halves. The first arrived in Wednesday's cipher that morning, decoded at the foot of Enid's cot. Dumbledore had gone silent. He had been close, the last message said, close to the second of the hidden pieces, somewhere cold and far, and then the messages had simply stopped. 3 days of nothing where there should have been daily word, and the Order did not know if he was hunted or hurt or worse, and the practical shape of it was a stone in the gut. The external Horcruxes were not all destroyed. Whatever they did to Riddle at Nevermore, no matter how completely they beat his army and broke his assault, Riddle would not truly die, because pieces of him still survived out in the dark where their one ally had gone quiet trying to reach them. The second half they had pried, gently and with the truth potion, from the servant Harry had thrown into the east wall, who had survived and been bound and questioned, and who had given up at last the shape of the key. "He's going to use you," Harry said low, holding Enid's hand, "to get through the wards. That's the key he's been cutting all winter. Nevermore's wards don't just check for permission, they check for what you are down deep, your essence, your soul. They never let Tom Riddle through everything he screams enemy, except, he made himself say it, except a piece of what he is already inside, in me, behind the scar, and I'm inside the wards. So as far as the oldest layer of the wards is concerned, a fragment of Riddle's soul already lives here, already belongs, already has a key. He thinks that when he comes, he can reach through the splinter in my scar and ride it across the threshold like it's his own front door. He doesn't have to break the wards. He thinks I'm going to hold them open for him from the inside without even knowing I'm doing it." Enid was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the wind worked at the breached wall and the infirmary candles guttered. "So let me get this straight," she said finally. "The bad guy's plan is hurt me to empty out your soul, walk through the front door using the piece of himself he left in you, and finish you when the bond's broken and you're hollow enough to fill." She opened her eyes. The gold was low, but it was there, banked and steady and not going anywhere. "He's bet his whole entire war on two things being true, that he can break us apart, and that the piece of him in you is loyal to him." A slow, dangerous smile spread across her gray face. "Harry, babe, has anyone checked lately who that piece is loyal to? Because it's been living in your house for 2 months, and I've been redecorating." They built the plan around her line, because her line was the whole answer wearing a joke. It took them the better part of a night in the infirmary so Enid could be in it, propped on pillows with a quill she kept dropping, and a refusal to be left out that no one was foolish enough to fight. Weems came and Sirius and Remus up from the cottage, and Wednesday with her notebook and the core of the school's defenders, and they did the thing Harry had never once been allowed to do in any war anyone had ever fought around him. They planned it together out loud with him at the center instead of in the dark. "Start from what he's certain of," Harry said. The cold, clean lines had come back, sharper than ever now that he had something to defend. "Everything he's built rests on 3 certainties, and certainty is the only thing I've ever been able to use against him because he never checks it. 1, he can break the bond by hurting Enid. 2, when the bond breaks, I go hollow and the splinter wakes hungry and loyal. 3, he can ride that splinter through the wards because a piece of him already lives inside our walls. 3 certainties stacked. He's going to bet the entire assault on all 3 being true on the same night." He looked around the room. "And all 3 are wrong, we just have to make sure he doesn't find out until he's already standing on the trapdoor." "Walk it," Weems said, slowly. "I have buried clever children who skip the slow part." Certainty 1, he thinks the bond is breakable. Harry turned his marked hand over, the crescent bright. 5 nights ago he nearly proved it, and that's the gift, because now he believes it more than ever. He felt the channel go white through my scar. He thinks he found the seam. We let him keep thinking it. On the night we sell him a broken bond, Enid goes down early, somewhere he can see, and I play hollow. I've spent 5 weeks teaching that splinter to read me as soft and frightened. On the night I give it the performance of my life, I let it feel the bond snap. I let it feel the vacancy open. I make myself believe all the way down that I've lost her and there's nothing left in me but the dark, and he reads it off me stamped with my own certainty, and he commits. You'd have to believe Enid was dead, Remus said quietly, completely with him listening. That's not a performance, Harry, that's a wound you'd be opening on purpose at the worst possible moment with everything riding on it. I know what it is. Harry did not look away from him. I've already felt it for real for 1 second 5 nights ago. I know exactly what shape to make, and the only way I survive making it is that I'll know it's a lie, and I'll know it because of certainty too. Is wrong how, Bianca said, because when the bond goes white I don't go hollow. Harry's voice didn't waver. He thinks the splinter rushes in to fill the empty house. But the house isn't going to be empty because Enid spent 2 months filling every room of it, and the bond doesn't actually break, we only make him think it breaks. Underneath the performance, the channel stays open, thin and hidden, the way I learned to hold a lie over the truth in the tower. He'll feel a broken bond on top. The real one keeps running underneath, where he's never thought to look, because why would a man look under a thing he's certain he just destroyed? Harry glanced at Enid, who gave him a thumbs up with a hand that barely lifted. She and I have been practicing holding the channel quiet under a loud lie since the cafe. We're good at it. We're about to be perfect at it. And certainty 3, Wednesday said, leaning forward, the gleam full up. The key. The key is the best part because it's his master stroke and it's the trapdoor. Harry set both hands flat on the cot's edge. He's going to reach through the splinter in my scar to cross the wards. He thinks the splinter is his, a loyal piece of him that'll open the door from the inside. But the splinter's been living in a house Enid's been crowding it out of for 2 months. Dumbledore felt it starving. It's not his anymore, not really. It's a cornered, shrinking thing that's been losing every inch of ground to the bond since the day she marked me. Harry looked around the room, and the plan was complete in front of him now, clean and terrible and his. So when he reaches through it to ride it across our threshold, he's not going to find a loyal door. He's going to find himself, the core of himself, the real peace, reaching his consciousness halfway across an ocean and into a house that is full and lit and waiting with the wards at his back and the bond at full burn in front of him. He's going to put his hand through the door, and we're going to close the door on his arm. The infirmary was silent. Outside, 3 nights from the new moon, the wind moved over the breached wall. You're going to trap his soul, Sirius said slowly, at the threshold. Pinned at the exact moment he's most certain he's already won. When he thinks Enid's dead, the bond's broken, and I'm a hollow door swinging open for him. Harry nodded. He'll commit everything to that crossing because it's the kill, it's the whole point. It's 14 years of hunting finally paying off. And when he's reached all the way through, when the most of him that he ever risks anywhere is stretched thin across the wards and into the splinter in my scar, Enid gets up. His voice went quiet. She's not dead, the bond's not broken, the house is full. And we use it, the bond at full power, the thing that's been starving him out for 2 months, and we don't just close the door, we push. We use her and the wards and everything this school is to drive the splinter out of me and back up the channel he opened, all of it, the piece in my scar and the piece of him reaching through it, expelled, severed, and slammed out into a circle we've built to hold it. We make him bring his own soul to the one place on earth designed to fill the vacancy he needs, and then we evict him from me and trap what's left. The external pieces, Remus said, the Horcruxes Albus hasn't found. Even if this works, even if you trap the piece in your scar and the consciousness he sends through, he doesn't die. The other pieces don't have to die at Nevermore, Harry said. They just have to die eventually, and they will, because the moment we expel the splinter from my scar, the door slams shut, the key's gone, and he's no longer immortal and hidden, he's mortal and exposed. A broken thing with a shattered army and no way back into the one piece of himself he kept safest. We win the night here. We win the war wherever Dumbledore is, or wherever the Order finishes the job he started. Tonight isn't about killing him forever. It's about taking back the door, freeing me from the thing in my head, and breaking him so badly in front of his own people that the legend he's spent a life building dies even if the body crawls off to try again. He looked at the silent room. He's spent 14 years certain he understands me because he's been living in my head. I'm going to use the door he forgot was a door. I told you that weeks ago. I just didn't know yet that the door had a wolf behind it. They pressure tested it for an hour after that because a plan you loved was a plan you hadn't finished, and Harry made them attack it. He won't reach through on the first push, Bianca said. He's careful, he'll send the army, watch it break us, wait until he's certain before he risks himself. Which is why Enid goes down before he's certain, Harry said. Not at the climax, early while he's still cautious, while it looks like an accident of the battle and not a stage we built. He needs to believe the bond broke by luck, not design. The moment he thinks the door fell open on its own, his caution becomes the thing that kills him, because a man who's been handed a gift doesn't inspect the wrapping. And if he brings something we haven't planned for, Yoko said, he always brings something. Then we use Wednesday and we use the cottage, and we use the fact that he has exactly one move he cannot resist, which is me, hollow and open, at the end of 14 years. Harry looked around. I can't plan for everything he might bring. I can plan for the one thing he can't stop himself from doing, which is walking through the door he's sure is his. Everything else is noise. We hold against the noise long enough for him to take the one bait he was never going to refuse. It asks a great deal of timing, Weems said. Enid falling at the right moment, you selling the hollow at the right moment, the circle waking at the right moment. A single beat early or late and he reads the whole stage. Then we drill the timing until it's a reflex, Harry said. We've got 3 nights, we don't sleep if we have to. He spent 14 years rehearsing how to kill me. We get 3 nights to rehearse how to let him think he did. He looked at Enid, pale on the pillows, who lifted her chin. We can do 3 nights. We can do 3 nights, Enid agreed, and the room, exhausted and frightened and absolutely committed, took it as the closest thing to a promise any of them had. There was a price in the plan, and they found it the way you always find the price, by saying the plan out loud until the soft places showed. The plan needed Enid. Not as bait, not only. It needed her on her feet at the climax, strong enough to anchor the bond at full burn and drive the splinter out, and she had 3 nights to come back from a wound that should have taken a month, a wound made by magic designed to cut exactly the thing the plan asked her to wield. The school's healers worked on her in shifts, and Yoko gave what vampires gave, and Weems brought out remedies from a locked room she did not explain, and Enid submitted to all of it with a patience that frightened Harry more than complaint would have, because patience was not her native tongue. I'll be ready, she told him the second night when the color had started barely to come back into her hair. Stop doing the math on your face, I can see you doing the math. I'll be ready because the alternative is you standing alone on that trapdoor believing I'm dead with nobody underneath holding the real bond, and that is not a thing that is going to happen, so my body can either cooperate or it can argue with me, and it has never once won an argument with me. She found his hand. 3 nights. I came back from 3 years of not being able to wolf. I can come back from a scratch in 3 nights. It's not a scratch, it's a scratch with ambition, she squeezed. Tell me about the circle instead. I want to hear the part where Wednesday gets to be terrifying. The circle was the other half of the work, and Wednesday ran it, because containment was a thing she understood in her bones. They built it in the breached east court, under the open sky where the new moon's dark would be thickest, a binding ring layered out of everything Nevermore had that the ordinary world did not. Old stone that remembered 3 centuries of refusing to fall, the fountain that was not water carried in vessels to the 4 points, Xavier's charcoal worked into sigils that would move when the moment came, Bianca's held notes wound into the air like wire. It was a circle built to receive a soul and refuse to let it leave, and they tested it carefully on smaller dark things, and it held, and Wednesday pronounced herself provisionally satisfied, which from Wednesday was a standing ovation. It took all of them to build it, and that was its own kind of medicine. Bianca walked the ring at dusk, laying her wound-up notes into the air one by one, and the work softened something in her that 2 years of running a club had armored over, and by the second night she was teaching Eugene how to hold a binding tone steady, the 2 of them humming in the cold like an unlikely choir. Xavier knelt for hours in the scorched stone, working his charcoal sigils until his hands were black to the elbow, and when Harry told him it was beautiful, he said, gruffly, that art was just weaponry you hadn't found the use for yet, and then ruined the toughness of it by going pink. Yoko paced the perimeter at vampire speed, memorizing every gap. And the younger students brought them food and blankets and stayed to watch, because the unwanted had learned over one long winter that the place where the work was being done was the place you wanted to be, near the people who had decided to fight for you. The circle, when it was finished, was not only a trap, it was the whole school's hands laid down in a ring, and Harry thought that was probably why it held. But on the 3rd afternoon she came to Harry in the dead tower alone, and she had the look she'd worn the day she dropped the fork, and Harry put down the ward he was nodding and gave her his whole attention. I had a vision, she said, about the night. I've been deciding whether to tell you because it's incomplete, and incomplete visions are how clever people talk themselves into stupid things, but you've earned the slow part. She sat on the windowsill. I saw the circle. I saw him caught in it, reaching, pinned, exactly as you designed. The plan works, Harry. I want you to hear that first. The plan works. She paused, and I saw a moment right at the end where it asks for something it hasn't told us the price of yet. A choice, yours, made fast in the dark with no time to plan it. I couldn't see what it was, only that you make it and that it costs, and that whether it costs everything or only something depends on a thing I can't see from here. Her flat, dark eyes held his. I'm telling you so that when the moment comes and the plan asks for more than the plan promised, you don't freeze. You've spent your life being handed prices other people chose for you. This one's going to be yours to pay or refuse in the dark alone. I'd rather you walk in knowing the bill isn't fully written than be surprised by it. Thank you, Harry said, because it was the truth, and because Wednesday's warnings were a kind of love she'd never call by that name. For telling me straight, don't get sentimental, it encourages you both. She stood. Enid's out of the infirmary. She walked here herself, slowly, refusing help to prove she could. She's on the roof. She said, and I quote, that you owe her a production. The last day before the dark of the moon, Nevermore made itself ready, and Harry walked through a school deciding in 100 quiet ways to be unbreakable. Weems assigned the ground like a general who had finally been given the army she'd always deserved. Bianca and the Nightshades took the high galleries in the water, where their voices carried farthest and the dead climbed slowest. Xavier seeded the grounds with charcoal sentries that would wake only at his word and hunt only what he named. Yoko marshaled the vampires into the dark between the torches, where speed lived. The younger students, Eugene among them, were given the inner keep and 100 small crucial jobs, runners and ward tenders and keepers of the wounded, because Weems understood that to send the young to safety was to teach them they were useless, and these children had spent their lives being told that, and she would not say it again. Even Ajax had a post on the east wall, gorgon-eyed, learning to aim the thing he'd always feared, and Enid had stopped by to tell him she'd known he'd come through, and the snakes had flushed proud and green. Harry found Sirius and Remus in the cottage at dusk, because Weems had granted them one last evening inside the wards, and because there were things a person said the night before in case. Sirius tried to be light about it and lasted nearly a minute. So tomorrow you let a dark lord think he murdered your girlfriend, fake being a hollow husk, and slam a magic door on his soul. Normal Tuesday, I had a paper route at your age. Then the lightness cracked, and he crossed the room and took Harry by both shoulders, the old grip, a man with nobody to practice on practicing one more time. Listen to me, the plan is good. Wednesday's a horror, and I mean that as the highest praise. The plans break, Harry, they always break. There's always a moment the plan doesn't cover, and I need you to promise me something for that moment. His eyes were bright and fierce. Choose to live, whatever it asks, whatever clever terrible thing the moment offers you, whatever prophecy or door or noble sacrifice it dangles. You choose the option where you walk back up that hill afterward. You've spent your whole life being told the brave thing is to die usefully. I'm telling you the brave thing is to come home. Let the rest of us be the ones who'd give everything. You've given enough. You promise me you come home. I promise, Harry said, and he meant it, because of Wednesday's vision and the price she couldn't see, and because a wolf on a roof was waiting to redo a centerfold. Remus said less, as he always did, but he held Harry longer, and at the end he said only, your parents would not have wanted a weapon. They'd have wanted this. A boy on a roof with someone who painted his nails blue. Whatever happens tomorrow, you already gave them the thing they died for. The rest is just the war. He stepped back, tired and steady. Now go to bed or go to the roof. I suspect I know which. The moon went dark the next night, and on the last clear evening before it, Harry climbed to the roof of Ophelia Hall, and Enid was there. She was thinner than she'd been, and the gray hadn't entirely left her, and she'd needed the slow way up the climb instead of the window, but she was there, wrapped in the loud blanket with the blue scarf at her throat and the cocoa steaming and her whole bright self organized, against all medical advice, into being exactly where she'd promised to be. Below them Jericho glittered in its bowl, and the ridge was dark where the light had finally gone out, the enemy done watching, the enemy coming, and above them the sky was clear and starlit and held no moon at all. You came up the hard way, Harry said, settling beside her, careful of her shoulder. I came up the only way there is when the window's not an option. That's not the hard way, that's just the way. She leaned into him gingerly, and he took her weight, and the crescents warmed between them, the bond running quiet and whole in theirs. You said you'd do it properly, on the roof, with the cocoa and the moon. She tipped her face up. There's no moon. There's no moon, Harry agreed. That seems right, actually. The moon's his night, tomorrow's his. Tonight there's no moon and no war and just this. He turned to her, and he did not reach for the cold, clean lines, did not plan the words, did not build a single wall. I love you. I've loved you since you handed me cocoa in a cold hallway and explained very carefully that I was allowed to send you away. I poured it down a magic channel during a battle because I'm a disaster with the worst timing of any romantic lead in history, and you deserved it, set on a roof with no moon where the only thing reading my mind is you. So, there it is. Properly, I love you, Enid Sinclair, and tomorrow night I'm going to stand on a trapdoor and let the worst man alive believe he killed you, and the only way I survive doing it is knowing it's the biggest lie I'll ever tell. Because you're the truest thing that's ever happened to me, and I am not letting go of the other end of that bond for anything. Not for the war, not for the world, not for 1 second. Enid looked at him, and her eyes were wet and shining and undignified and home, and she did not make a joke, which was how he knew it had landed all the way down. Mine, she said softly, the way she'd said it in the office weeks ago, not for the school, not for the dark, just for him, pressing it into the crescent with her thumb. You hear how I'm saying it, not so they know, so you do. Mine, and I'm yours, and tomorrow we stand side by side with nobody in front, and we close a door on a dark lord's arm, and then we come back up here, and I'm going to make you say all of that again, slower, because I'm keeping it forever, and I want to get the wording right for the scrapbook. She pressed her forehead to his. That's the plan. That's the whole entire plan. Survive the apocalypse, then redo the centerfold. They stayed on the roof a long time, under the empty starlit dark where the moon should have been, and below them the town slept, and beyond the dark ridge an army of the patient dead gathered itself for the last night. And a thing in pieces sharpened its three certainties, and on the roof of Ophelia Hall a boy who had never been chosen first sat with the most dangerous creature on the field and let himself, on the eve of the worst night of his life, be completely, recklessly happy. Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. One together he came at the dead middle of the moonless night, and he came the way the worst weather comes, with a stillness in front of it. The dead came first, as they had before, but there was no probing in it now, no test. The gray tide rolled up out of the pines in a flood that did not thin and did not tire, and behind it walked the living, his people robed and silent, dozens of them spread across the slope, and behind them, last, unhurried, certain, walked the thing that had hunted Harry since the cradle. And even at that distance, even across the dark, Harry felt the splinter behind his scar lean toward its maker like a compass finding north. "He's here," Harry said on the front steps between Weems and Enid, and the school behind them drew its breath and became, all at once, the thing it had spent 3 centuries practicing to be. The battle that followed Harry would never be able to tell as a story, because battles are not stories, they are 100 small forevers happening at once. He would remember pieces. Bianca's voice rising from the high gallery in a note that turned a whole rank of the climbing dead to stillness. Xavier's charcoal beasts pouring black down the walls. Yoko a streak of shadow through the torchlight here and gone, and a robed figure dropping where she'd been. Weems on the steps in a shape that had stopped pretending to be a woman, vast and pale and terrible, and the dead breaking against her like surf on a cliff. The younger students in the keep behind them, running water and bandages and word, Eugene white-faced and unflinching at his post. The whole unwanted school standing in the dark for the place that had wanted them and holding. And Harry in the center of it, fighting as he had learned to fight in the dead tower, with the floor of the bond firm beneath him and Enid at his shoulder, the two of them moving as one thing, side by side, nobody in front, exactly as they'd sworn. His magic came up clean and enormous and exact, and hers came up gold and tireless beside it, and where they fought together the dark simply did not pass, and for a while, a long while, the line held and the plan waited folded inside the battle like a knife inside a sleeve. He found Riddle's eyes across the field once, deliberately, and let the splinter carry the look both ways. He had expected to feel the old terror. He had stood at the wrong end of that gaze in a graveyard, and felt the whole world go thin. But he had spent 2 months learning what he now was, and when he met the red eyes across the dark he felt, instead of terror, strange and steady pity, because the creature on the slope had made himself unkillable by tearing his own soul to pieces and hiding them in the world like a frightened child hiding valuables, and had never once in a long and brilliant and barren life been chosen by anyone for anything but use, and did not know, could not know, was constitutionally incapable of imagining. Thing that stood at Harry's shoulder in a blue scarf. "You don't understand what you're walking into," Harry thought, and did not let the thought reach the splinter, kept it in the sealed room with the truth. "You think you're coming to take a piece of yourself home. You're coming to a house that's full, and you've never in your life seen what full looks like." Across the field, Voldemort lifted one pale hand, and the dead surged, and the living advanced behind them, and the real battle, the one underneath the battle, began. It was time to lose. Harry sent the signal down the bond, the one they had drilled until it was a reflex. 3 nights of no sleep distilled into a single struck glass note that meant now. And Enid, fighting gold and magnificent at his side, heard it and got herself to the place they'd chosen, the open ground below the east gallery where Riddle's line could see. And Harry turned toward her with the whole field watching through the splinter in his scar, and he began to tell the biggest lie of his life. It happened fast because it had to look like the battle and not like a stage. A robed figure broke from Riddle's line toward the east gallery, and Enid turned to meet it as the wolf, gold and terrible, and they had drilled this 100 times in 3 nights, the timing of it down to the half-second, and still Harry's whole body screamed against it as the dark weapon came up, the same barbed, bond-cutting magic that had nearly finished her 5 nights before, and Enid let it land. She sold it as she sold everything completely, with her whole self. The wolf screamed and went down, and the scream was real because the magic was real and it hurt, and she fell in the open ground below the gallery where Riddle's whole line could see, and she changed back as she fell, the wolf slipping away, Enid small and human and still on the cold stone with the blue scarf going dark, and she did not move, and she made herself not move, and she shut down the bond on her end to a thread so fine that even Harry, who knew it was a lie, who had drilled the lie, felt the channel go quiet and white and felt the bottom drop out of the world, and Harry let it take him. This was the part no one could fake, the part Remus had named the worst of it, and Harry had only one way through, which was to make the lie true. He took the sealed room at the center of himself, the one where he kept the unbearable fact of loving her, and he turned it inside out. He let himself believe she was dead. He reached for the memory of the bond going white 5 nights ago, the second he had not been sure there would be a self left to grieve. and he opened it all the way, and he poured himself into it, and he stopped holding the truth that it was a lie, and for a span of seconds that he would never fully describe to anyone, Harry Potter stood in the middle of a battle and grieved Enid Sinclair with the entire furnace of what she had made him, and it was not acting, and that was why it worked. The splinter behind his scar woke ravenous. It felt the vacancy open, the house going empty, 2 months of being crowded toward the door suddenly reversed, room after room falling dark, and it rushed to fill them, eager, gloating, and across the field, the red-eyed thing on the slope felt its splinter surge and understood that its 3 certainties had all come true on the same night. The bond was broken, the boy was hollow, the door was open, 14 years of hunting had arrived at its hour. Harry fell to his knees beside Enid's still body, and he let the field see it. The famous boy emptied out, kneeling in the wreckage with nothing left in him but the dark, and he lifted his face toward the slope where his enemy stood, and he let the splinter carry the invitation it could not read as a trap because it was stamped all the way down with Harry's own genuine devastation. There's nothing left. Come and take it. Come home. Voldemort came. He did not walk the last of the distance. He did not need to. Harry felt it begin behind his scar. The cold, vast consciousness gathering itself, narrowing, pouring toward the splinter that was its anchor inside the walls, reaching across the dark and the wards toward the open door of a hollowed boy, committing the way a man commits his whole weight to a step he is certain of, the most of himself he had ever risked anywhere, stretching thin across an ocean, and into the piece of himself behind Harry's eyes, certain. And the wards of Nevermore, which checked not for permission but for what you were, felt a fragment of Riddle's soul already inside their walls reach out to welcome the rest of him across the threshold, and began, exactly as he had planned, to let him in. He came through the splinter like cold water through a cracked dam, his consciousness flooding the channel of the scar, reaching for the empty rooms, reaching to fill the house and finish what was left of him and take back the piece of himself that had been starving, and he was halfway across, more than halfway, the most of Tom Riddle that had existed in one place in 14 years stretched thin and committed and exposed across the threshold of a school full of monsters. And underneath the hollow in the sealed room the dark had never found, the real bond was still running. Now, Harry whispered to the stone, to the still girl, to the field. Enid, now. Enid Sinclair opened her eyes. She was not dead. She had never been dead. The wound was real and it hurt, and she had lain in it bleeding the lie out into the open air while the worst man alive committed his whole soul to a door. And now, with that soul stretched thin and halfway across the threshold, she opened her eyes, and the gold was full up, all the way up, brighter than the night she had marked him, and she rose. The wolf came up out of her in a single surge, whole and golden and uninjured by anything that mattered, and the field made a sound, 200 voices in a robed line, and a red-eyed thing all understanding at once that the corpse they had been told was bait had stood up alive, that the broken bond was not broken, that the open door had a wolf behind it after all. And Wednesday, from the dark of the East Court, where she had waited all night beside a circle built to hold a soul, said one word, and the trap woke. The containment ring blazed up out of the breached stone, 3 centuries of stubborn rock and a fountain that was not water, and Xavier's charcoal sigils and Bianca's wound-up notes, and every old strange thing Nevermore had that the ordinary world did not, and it caught the channel of the scar the way a net catches a diving bird, and it began slowly, terribly to pull. Harry felt it all at once. Splinter surging to fill an empty house hid instead a house flooding with light, because Enid had risen and the bond had flared to full burn and was pouring into him faster than the dark could spread, room after room slamming bright, and the splinter recoiled cornered, and behind it the vast committed consciousness of its maker was stretched thin across the wards and could not pull back fast enough. And the circle had it now, and the bond was driving it out, and the whole architecture of the plan was working exactly perfectly, and Harry understood in that instant that it was not going to be enough, because the splinter had a handhold. He felt it with the cold, clear certainty that had saved his life a dozen times. The splinter, expelled and screaming, was not going alone. It had lived in him for 14 years. It had roots. It had grown into the walls of him, into the oldest sealed rooms, into the places he had locked so tight even he never went there, the cupboard, the years of nobody coming, the wall he had built at 14 when he decided he would never again let himself be fully seen, because being seen was how you got taken. The splinter was anchored in exactly the part of Harry that had never been opened, and as the circle pulled it out it was pulling those walls with it, and the walls were load-bearing, and if they went, Harry went with them, dragged out of himself and into the circle with the thing that had haunted him, and there would be nothing left up the channel to come home to. This was the price. This was the choice Wednesday could not see, arriving fast in the dark, alone. He could hold the walls. He could brace, as he had braced his whole life, lock down the sealed rooms and refuse to let them be torn out, and if he did, the splinter would keep its handhold and stay, half expelled, and the plan would fail, and Riddle would tear free and the night would be lost. Or he could let go. He could open the last walls himself, the ones he had built so the world could never take him, open them all the way, make himself completely seen and completely vulnerable with a Dark Lord's soul reaching through him, and trust with no time to plan it, no proof, no wall left to catch him if he was wrong, that the bond would hold him when he had nothing of his own left to hold himself. Choose to live, Sirius had said. Choose the option where you walk back up the hill. But Sirius had been wrong about the shape of it, because the option where Harry lived was not the option where he held on. It was the option where he let go of everything and trusted someone else to hold the other end. He had never done it. In 15 years, he had never once let anyone all the way in, because everyone who got all the way in had been taken from him or had wanted him for use. The wall at 14 had been the last and the highest, and he had built it to survive, and it was the handhold now, and the splinter was anchored in it, and the only way to evict the dark was to tear down the one defense that had kept him alive, in the middle of a battle, with no guarantee at all. Harry looked across the burning circle at the wolf with the gold full up in her eyes, at Enid, who had stood up alive out of a lie to give him this, who had spent 2 months filling every room she could reach and was pouring herself into him now at full burn and reaching for the last locked rooms she had never been allowed into, and he understood that she had been knocking on that final wall since the day she handed him cocoa in a cold hallway, and that she had never once forced it. And that she was not forcing it now, she was only there on the other end, waiting, as she had waited in the hallway every single morning, ready to catch whatever he finally let fall. He let go. He opened the last wall himself, the one he had built to never be taken, and he let the cupboard be seen, and the years of nobody coming, and the 14-year-old who had decided he would survive by needing no one. He opened all of it at once with a Dark Lord's soul reaching through the wreckage, and for one weightless instant Harry Potter was completely undefended, completely open, completely seen, with nothing of his own left to hold himself in his own body. And the bond caught him. It came up the channel like a tide coming home, the whole golden weight of being chosen, and it filled the last rooms before the splinter could fall into them, flooded the load-bearing walls with something stronger than the walls had ever been, and the splinter's handhold turned to lighten its grip, and it had nothing left to anchor to, nothing to drag out with it, because the part of Harry it had lived in for 14 years was no longer empty and no longer locked and no longer his alone to lose. It was full. It was hers, it was theirs, and there was not 1 square inch of Harry Potter left for the dark to stand on. The circle pulled, and this time it took only what was meant to leave. The splinter tore free of Harry clean, roots and all, and behind it the vast committed consciousness of Lord Voldemort, stretched thin and exposed across the threshold and anchored to nothing now but the fragment being expelled, came with it, all of it, the most of himself he had ever risked, pulled up the channel of the scar and out and slammed into the waiting circle, and the ring of old stubborn stone closed on it the way a door closes on an arm, and held. On the slope, the body of the thing that had hunted Harry since the cradle dropped where it stood, the soul that had animated it torn out and trapped behind it inside the walls of a school for the unwanted, and across the field the dead it had raised stopped all at once, the leash cut, hundreds of patient corpses simply falling still, and the robed line that had followed it looked at the empty husk of their immortal master and broke, and ran into the dark. Away from a school that had done the one thing he had promised them could never be done, it was over in the space of a held breath, the longest one Harry had ever held, and the last lie, and the truest thing. Harry knelt in the sudden silence with the scar on his brow gone cool at last, cool and quiet and empty of everything but himself. And across the wreckage the wolf folded down into a girl in a blue scarf and crossed to him at a dead run and caught him as he fell, and he let her completely with nothing held back because there were no walls left to hold anything back with, and that he understood. His face in her shoulder and her arms locked around him, and the whole impossible school still standing in the dark behind them, was the entire point and had been from the start. The thing in the circle did not die quietly because it had spent a lifetime learning not to die at all. It raged behind the ring of old stone, a soul with no body and no army and no door, a cold shrieking core of what had once been Tom Riddle who had torn himself to pieces rather than be mortal, and it threw itself against the binding and found it built out of exactly the things it had never believed in, stubbornness and sanctuary, and a school full of the unwanted refusing to fall. Wednesday stood at the edge of it with her flat, dark eyes steady and did not look away because someone, she said, ought to witness the precise moment a legend learned it was only a man. But it did not unravel, not yet, and Harry understood why even as Weems and the others gathered at the circle's edge in the wreckage of the Dawngrade court. There are still pieces of him out there, Harry said, hoarse, Enid's arm around him holding most of his weight. The Horcruxes Dumbledore never found. As long as one survives, the thing in the circle has somewhere to crawl back to. We trapped the core, we didn't end him, he looked at the shrieking ring. We just bought the time for someone to finish the rest. The rest is finished, said a voice from the gate, old and worn to the grain. As of 4 days ago, at a cost I shall be paying for the remainder of a considerably shortened life. I am sorry to have been out of contact. I was, for a stretch, somewhat trapped at the bottom of the world, and then somewhat busy not dying, and the owls in that part of the ocean are unreliable. Albus Dumbledore came up the front road in the gray light, and he came slowly, leaning on a staff he had not carried before, and his right hand was black and withered to the wrist, and his face had aged a decade in a fortnight, but his blue eyes were clear, and they went first, before anything, to Harry, and what was in them was not the satisfaction of a man whose weapon had fired true. It was the plain, undefended relief of an old man finding a child alive. "You found the last one," Harry said. "I found the last of them, the cave and the cup, and one final piece in a place I will tell you about when we are both less likely to weep, and I destroyed them every one with these hands, the last of which the work cost me." He lifted the blackened hand without complaint, a receipt rather than a wound, which means, Harry, that the thing screaming in that remarkable circle is the whole of what remains of Tom Riddle. No anchors, no spares, no door left open anywhere in the world. He looked at the ring, and something terribly old and terribly sad crossed his ruined face. It has nowhere to go. It never built itself a soul worth returning to, only hiding places, and the hiding places are gone, and a thing that cannot die and cannot live and cannot leave will, in the end, simply stop. Not tonight, but soon. You may none of you wish to watch the end of it, and none of you should be ashamed of that wish. The circle shrieked thinner now, and Harry found he felt the pity again, the strange, steady pity, for the cold core unraveling behind the stone, the soul that had made itself unkillable and never once made itself loved, and who was learning, at the very last, the only lesson he had spent a lifetime refusing, which was that a soul with no one in it has nothing to hold it together when the hiding ends. Dumbledore turned from it deliberately, the way you turn from a thing that no longer deserves your attention, and he looked at Harry and at Enid beside him, and at the marked hands, and at the school standing bloodied and unbroken in its own dawn, and he leaned on his staff and bowed his head, and when he spoke it was the steel gone soft at last, all the way through. "I came to this fence 2 months ago," he said, "to take you home and make you my weapon, and I dressed it in every kindness I owned, and a wolf in a parrot-colored coat told me to my face that there was an ocean of difference between wanting you safe and wanting you back, and that she was standing in it." He looked at Enid. "You were right, Miss Sinclair, you were right about all of it. I have spent a long life being the cleverest man at every gate, and I stood at yours and was outthought by a 15-year-old who simply loved him correctly, which is a thing all my cleverness never managed in 15 years of trying." He turned back to Harry. "You did not win this as my weapon. You won it as yourself, from a place that chose you, with people at your back who would have died before they spent you, and you did it by doing the one thing I could never have ordered and never have predicted, which is that at the last, with everything riding on it, you let yourself be held. I have studied magic for 110 years, Harry. I never found that spell. You were taught it in a hallway over cocoa by someone who waited." His eyes were wet. "I am so very sorry it took me so long to want this for you instead of from you, and I am so very glad I lived to be told off and to be wrong and to see it." Harry looked at the old man who had loved him and used him and come, at the last, all this way, to stand at the right end of the choice. "You're still my ally," Harry said, "if you want to be, not my handler, my ally. There's a difference, and you finally know it, and so do I. I should like that," Dumbledore said, "more than I can say," and behind them, very quietly, the shrieking in the circle had begun, at last, to fade. It took until the sun cleared the ridge. The cold core in the ring grew thinner as the light came up, its rage running out the way a fire runs out when there is nothing left to burn and nothing left to feed it, until what raged there was only cold, and then only quiet, and then nothing at all, a soul with no body and no hiding place, and no one in it, simply ceasing to be held together. Wednesday watched every minute of it and did not look away, and when it was finished she closed her notebook and said only, to no one, that it was a small and lonely ending for a thing that had wanted to be a god, and that she found she could not even hate it, which she resented, because hating things was a comfort and she had been denied one. Then she went to find breakfast, because witnessing was hungry work, and because the war was over and there were, at last, more interesting things to do than fear. The sun came up on a school still standing, which was the only victory that had ever mattered, and Nevermore said about the slow, ordinary business of being alive in the morning. There were no dead among the unwanted. That was the thing Weems made certain everyone understood, walking the grounds in the gray light, counting her students one brave, exhausted face at a time, and finding, against every law of war, all of them, there were wounds. There was a breached east wall that would take a season to mend, and a courtyard with a scorched ring of stone in it that the school would never quite be able to bring itself to repair, because some things you keep. But the unwanted had held the place that wanted them, whole, and the legend that had come up the slope certain it could not be done had unraveled in a circle of their own making, and the morning belonged to them. Weems said as much briefly in the quad where it had all begun, to a school too tired to cheer and too alive to grieve. She did not call it a victory. She called it a morning, and said that mornings were the only thing any of them had ever truly fought for, the plain ordinary chance to have another one, in a place that wanted them, among people who would not spend them. Then she told them all to go to bed, and most of them didn't, because the young, having survived the end of the world, generally prefer to watch the sun come up on it. Sirius reached Harry before the sun had fully cleared the ridge, down from the cottage at a dead run the instant the wards let him through, and he did not say anything at all. He just took Harry's face in both hands and looked at the scar gone cool and quiet, and then he made a sound that a stronger man would have been ashamed of and pulled Harry into a hug that lasted until the world steadied. "You came home," Sirius said into his hair, wrecked fierce. "You promised and you did it. You let go of the wall and you came home." He pulled back. "Remus owes me 10 galleons. I bet him you'd find the third door even in the dark. I always bet on you finding the third door." Remus, arriving behind him with his tired, real smile, paid the 10 galleons on the spot and said it had been the gladdest 10 galleons he had ever lost. Eugene found Harry by mid-morning with another jar of the good honey and the information, delivered in a reverent whisper, that the entire school was now referring to the scorched ring in the East Court as the place where the wolf got up, and that there was already a song, and that it was not a very good song, but it had a chorus everyone could shout. Bianca claimed credit for the chorus and denied the verses. Yoko had slept through the singing and woke to ask, with great dignity, who had won, and on being told, nodded once and went back to sleep. Wednesday wrote the whole night down in her black notebook, every beat of it, and when Harry asked her why, she said that someone had to keep the true version before it became only a song, and that she had decided, provisionally, that it was the most interesting thing that had ever happened to her, and that she retracted nothing she had ever said about the genre except, perhaps, all of it. And Enid did not leave Harry's side all that long bright morning because she never did when she had his hand, and the crescents kept their low warmth between them, the bond running quiet and whole in theirs, no longer hiding anything, no longer holding a lie over truth, just open, the two of them, all the rooms lit, nothing left locked. "How does it feel?" she asked him on the steps in the sun, watching the school they'd saved go about the miracle of an ordinary morning. "The scar. Being just you in there for the first time." Harry considered it. The scar was cool. The sealed rooms were open. The walls he had built at 14 to survive being unwanted were gone, torn down by his own hand with a Dark Lord's soul reaching through the wreckage, and he had thought his whole life that without those walls he would be unbearable, exposed, easy to take. He felt instead only the steady golden weight on the other end of a bond, holding the door he no longer had to hold himself. "Full," he said. "It feels full." He turned his marked hand over in hers, the crescent bright, the one blue nail she still repainted every week long since joined by others. "There was a piece of the worst man who ever lived living in the empty part of me for 14 years, and you crowded it out the door with cocoa and a scrapbook and a hallway you sat in every single morning. And this morning there's nothing in there but me and you and the house you filled. I keep waiting to feel afraid of being this open. I think I forgot how. I think you made me forget how." Enid's eyes went bright, the undignified shining she never bothered to hide, and she pressed her thumb over the crescent, the old gesture, and said it the way she'd said it on the roof with no moon, just for him, so that he would know. "Mine," she said, "and you're mine. And we did it side by side with nobody in front, exactly like I said, and now you owe me a production and a centerfold and the rest of an extremely long werewolf life, and I am collecting all three, starting with breakfast, because you have not eaten since yesterday, and I will not have it said that I let my mate fight a Dark Lord on an empty stomach. Come on, disaster. The war's over. Let's go ruin everyone's morning." A year and a half is a long time at that age, and it changed them the way time changes anyone, which is to say slowly and in color and mostly for the better. The world out beyond the wards had taken the news of Tom Riddle's end in its own slow, stunned way, and there had been for a while an enormous wanting of Harry, statues proposed and titles offered, and a whole society desperate to make him its symbol again now that the symbol was safely victorious. He had declined all of it from behind the wards of a school for the unwanted, with a politeness he had learned from a head mistress and a stubbornness he had learned from a wolf. He had given the world its end of the war. He was keeping the rest of his life for himself and for the people who had chosen him before he was useful for anything, and the world, denied its symbol, had grumbled and adjusted and at last, mostly, let him be. Enid had called her mother the morning after the battle, from the one telephone Jericho boasted, and had said "told you so" to a woman who told her so for 3 years, and then both of them had cried down the line for the better part of an hour, and a fortnight later the whole Sinclair pack had come east to meet the wizard their late bloomer had marked in front of an entire school. They were enormous and loud, and they smelled, Enid warned him, fear before they arrived, which the wolf in them would respect more than courage, and so Harry had not pretended to be unafraid, and the two enormous brothers had looked at the wizard who'd let a Dark Lord think he killed their sister and then closed a door on the Dark Lord's soul, and had decided, with the simple finality of their kind, that he was pack. Enid's mother had held Harry's marked hand in both of hers and looked at the crescent and wept again and said only, "You found him, baby, you actually found him, and Harry, who had spent his life being wanted for use, had stood in a kitchen full of werewolves being wanted for nothing at all, and had not known where to put any of it, and had let Enid hold him up because that was the deal, that was always the deal. Sirius and Remus had taken a house in the valley below the school, a real one with rooms enough for a boy to come home to on the weekends, and the word home had stopped being a thing Harry flinched at. Dumbledore wrote often now, long letters with no leverage hidden in them, an old man and a young one teaching each other the shapes of magic and forgiveness in roughly equal measure, and when he visited he played a vicious game of wizard chess with Wednesday that neither of them would admit the other was winning. The core of them, the ones who had stood in the dark of the weather vane and the dark of the East Court, had become something the school had no word for and did not need one, closer than friends and stranger than family, the people who had each chosen the others before any of them was useful for anything. He turned 17 on the roof of Ophelia Hall, of age at last in the eyes of magic, with the whole strange family of them crowded onto the lid behind the gable. Sirius and Remus arguing happily over a cake that Sirius had insisted upon because, he said, there was always supposed to be a cake and nobody had ever given Harry one. Wednesday charting constellations and predicting, with relish, mild and specific misfortunes for everyone present. Yoko and Bianca and Xavier and Eugene, the core of them, grown closer than blood through the one night that had made them. Weems, who had climbed the forbidden roof herself and confiscated no one, watching her impossible students with something on her face that on a warmer person would have been pride, and on Larissa Weems was simply, quietly, the thing itself. Sirius made a toast because Sirius would always make a toast, and it started as a joke about the cake and turned 3 sentences into something with a catch in it, about a godson he once wanted only to keep ordinary and safe, and how he'd learned, watching this strange bright family assemble itself out of the unwanted, that safe was a smaller wish than he'd known, and that the larger one, the one he hadn't dared name at the gate 2 years before, had been this: a table, people. A boy at the center of it instead of on it, with a wolf's hand in his and 17 candles and nobody, anywhere, counting the days until he'd leave. He had to stop before the end, and Remus finished it for him, the way Remus finished most of Sirius's sentences, with one quiet line that James and Lily would have given anything to be on this roof tonight, and that the next best thing was that their son was and was loved and knew it. Then Eugene lit the candles, and the whole odd family of them sang the song badly and with great feeling, the one with the chorus everyone could shout, and Harry sat in the middle of it with the firelight on all the faces that had chosen him and let himself be sung to, which was a kind of magic Dumbledore had been right about never finding in any book. And Enid, of course. Always Enid, the blue scarf gone soft with 2 years of wearing, her hair some new impossible color it changed with the season, her hand in his with the crescents warm between them. The bond run so deep by now that they had mostly stopped needing the struck glass notes and simply knew, the way you know your own pulse, that the other one was there. Later, when the family had climbed down and the cake was a memory and the valley glittered below in its bowl with no wrong light on any ridge, the two of them stayed, the way they always stayed, with the cocoa and the loud blanket and the whole patient sky. "You promised me a production," Enid said. 2 years ago, the proper version, on the roof with the moon. There's a moon tonight, I checked, I planned this, I'm very romantic and I want credit. You plan my birthday around getting me to redo a love confession. I plan everything around you, that's the entire job, keep up. She turned to face him, cross-legged on the blanket, the moon behind her turning the colored ends of her hair to silver, and she took both his hands. Okay, go, properly, for the scrapbook, I left a whole spread. So Harry told her properly on the roof with the moon. He told her about the cold hallway and the cocoa that wasn't a contract, and the floor she'd handed him without knowing it was a floor, and the rooms she'd filled, and the wall he'd torn down trusting her to catch him. And the morning the scar went cool and there was nothing left in him but himself and the house she'd made of him. He told her he loved her as he could say it now, with no walls and no war and no audience but the moon, the truest thing he had, said slow so she could keep it. And Enid, 17 and golden and entirely undignified about the tears, kissed him then, on the roof under the moon, and it was a chaste and enormous thing. The kiss of 2 people who had grown up holding each other's hand through the end of the world. And when she pulled back, she pressed her forehead to his as she had 100 times and would 100,000 more, and the crescents flared warm between them. And below them the town slept and the school dreamed and the long good life stretched out ahead of them in every color she owned. Mine, she whispered just for him so that he would always know. Yours, Harry said, and finally, completely, with every wall down and every room lit and nothing held back at all, believed it. Chapter 7.